Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. This is going to be a live discussion. It's going to be a long discussion, but it has been requested. So today we are going to be talking about how inmates manipulate staff. And I think a lot of this could actually apply to just manipulation out in the real world. So there's a lot of nuggets here, but the reason why prison is a foundation for it is because this is my experience and where I picked up these tactics. But I will guarantee you that these tactics could be applied elsewhere outside of the prison setting. Actually, what we're going to talk about today is from this book, Inmate Manipulation Decoded, which is available on Amazon. So if you guys are really interested in inmate manipulation, you're definitely going to want to get this book. It's available on Amazon. It's for about 20 bucks, I think. And guys, how we're going to do this today is I'm going to have Russ Hamilton and Joe Pomponio on. They're going to be coming up as well. But what I'm going to do is I have my playlist of videos. So what we're going to do is we're going to meet with Russ and Joe. Then we're going to sit back and we're going to watch a video first. There's about 9 of them. And then we're going to discuss the video and then go to the next one. So we're prepared to be here for a bit. And we're going to answer all your questions in between each video. So we're going to take note of some of the questions that you're stating in the comments, and then we'll answer those when we go right back in between each video. And then in the process, we'll also be typing while the videos are playing. The longest video is about 20 minutes or 28 minutes. After that, other videos average between 15 to 8 or 9 minutes. I think there's another one that hits 22 mark, but it's broken into 9 sections. First, the generalized intro. Then we go into the different sections of how manipulation works using different types of theories. And then the final section will be how we can defend ourselves. Now, guys, here's where the magic comes in. And Alicia could definitely agree with this as well. The magic comes in from you being able to see what's being presented and then applying it to your life, your situations. And I think that's where the magic is. But real quick, guys, this show is sponsored by 3 entities. We have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, if you're looking to get your degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tear Talk. And just again, guys, looking to get that degree, please check out American Military University. We also have Guardian RFID. From inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And we have Shea USA. Shea USA is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. Guys, if you want to check out the latest technology in contraband detection, you got to check out Shea USA's website. So real quick, before I introduce my guest, we're going to go through a course on inmate manipulation right now. This is pretty cool, guys. This is what I go when I travel around the country doing. So I think this is pretty cool to already have the class made, which is great. So then we could just let that run. Then we could have dialogue in between, but just to show you what we're going to be looking at a little bit before I get the guys in. Let me show you guys something. We are going to be going through these videos here that you see on the side. So there should be about 9 of them. And then there is the, that other one's the trailer for the course. So we don't really have to look at that. So let me bring on the guys. I think it's going to be exciting. And what I would like to do, guys, if there's ever a class that we'd like to give, this is also a great way to do it. We can even do it in a private session. But be advised, guys. These are based on social psych theory, some of my experiences. So the stuff that we're teaching right now pretty much comes from the inmates. I mean, if you think about it, because we learned from what they were trying to do to us. So I think it's going to be a very good dialogue. Hey, Russ, what's up, man? You ready? Russ, is that a 70s hippie shirt?
Yeah, you like that? I'm just kind of like, tie-dyeing some stuff here. And, I don't know. It's what I've got on.
No, I like it. This is going to be a great dialogue, guys. What you thought about this, Russ? You think it's going to be good?
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I'm gonna stay with you guys as long as I can here. But this was kind of a last minute thing. I didn't know we were going to do all 9, but yeah, I'm down for it.
It was just requested. It was just requested of us, Russ. We did a live, and then what happened was they wanted to see it, so I'll put it out there, and people could also catch it on the replay. But this video will be something that they give to the different academies as well. So I think that's pretty good. All right, so let me get Joe Pomponio on. What's up, Joe?
What's happening, guys? Good evening.
Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. I'm Joe Pomponio, recently retired from Texas Department of Criminal Justice, or Department of Corrections, with 30 years. And looking forward to tonight's panel. This ought to be interesting.
Yeah, I think so, too. It's going to be – now, Joe, have you ever seen this course yet?
I've seen a couple of the videos. I haven't seen them all.
So this is going to be cool, and they got Russ rocking the tie-dye. Hey, Russ, did you get a chance to introduce yourself before we start cracking into the first video?
Oh, absolutely. My name is Russ Hamilton. I'm a former and retired sergeant with California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Started at San Quentin way back in 1989. I've also worked as a senior correctional officer at a juvenile detention facility here in Northern California. And I currently work for a private company, and we do reentry and rehabilitation work for a local probation department and a local jail.
All right, guys. So, guys, this is going to be fun. We're going to take you into a world of manipulation. Yes, it's a prison setting, but as I said, it could be applied elsewhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one video, then take a break, and then we're going to answer questions that are in the chat. Maybe have some discussion on discussions on what we pick up as well during the dialogue. So we'll be taking some notes as well. Maybe certain things that we can clarify. The first thing is going to be the intro video. And then, guys, as I said, in between each video, we'll have discussions, and it's going to be great. I appreciate that, Rose. I love doing this. This is going to be good. So, and it's timely right now. We all know that. So let's just give some shouts before we start. Steve, what's up? Julie, what's up? Alicia, she's going to be filtering some of the questions as well. And then we also have Anthony M. Painting again, Russ. That's what he asked you, Russ, if you're painting.
Finger painting.
Russ has moved up. He used to paint with his tongue. Yeah, guys, I would recommend what Julie said. Definitely have this notebook out because there's going to be a lot of information here, guys. So first we're going to go into an all-nighter, Ant. It's worth it. First, we're going to go into the intro, which will break down how the course is laid out. And then after that, we'll go into each section. So let's do the first part. Stand by. Because we know. Doing today? My name is Anthony Gangi. Thank you for taking my course on inmate manipulation, the psychology of inmate manipulation. If you guys are not familiar with who I am, my name is Anthony Gangi. I have over 18 years in this profession. I started as an officer, worked my way up to the administrative level, and I also host a show called Tear Talk. You can find the show on YouTube, and it gets distributed through Corrections One, which is a great resource for anybody working in corrections or trying to get into the field of corrections. You can find it on multiple venues, including Facebook and just their own website, corrections1.com. Now, guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's a course that not a lot of agencies offer because they really don't believe in how deep this topic is. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be some people that may have to take this course that are thinking, hey, Gange, I don't need it. I'm not going to fall for it. There's no way, Gangi, I'm going to bring in a phone. There's no way I'm going to bring in drugs. Gangi, there's no way I'm going to have sex with an inmate. And there's a lot of people that thought that too. A lot of people that had the right mindset coming into this profession, wanted to be that professional. wanted to do their job effectively, but they got caught up in the game. And when they realized they were caught up, it was too late. Next thing you know, they're asking themselves, man, how did I get to this point? And the reason why I know that that could happen, because it almost happened to me. There was a moment, and I'll tell you guys about this moment at the end of this video, the intro, where I was vulnerable. And if I didn't check myself at the right time, I would have made a bad choice. And I would have found myself possibly in handcuffs. But thank God I have enough insight. And thank God I knew and recognized that something didn't feel right. You know, guys, a lot of people, again, when we're talking about inmate manipulation, they focus on that outcome, that surface. The point is, here's the cell phone and we need it. Give us the drugs, we need it. But at that point, it's too late. At that point, the damage has already been done. Focusing on just the outcome, it minimizes the game itself, which is what we should be looking at. We should be looking at one word, guys. One word. And this is a key word, guys, that I want you to remember throughout this course, because this is what we're trying to identify. What we're trying to identify is this. It's the process. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. It's the process in the end that catches us. It's the process in some cases makes this impossible for us to turn away. You know, when inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react to situations that we're in. They manipulate our motivations, our automatic responses, stuff that we're not aware we're doing, choices that are in conflict with who we want to be in this profession. And they do it in such a subtle manner, guys, that we keep on making these choices without realizing the path we're going down. And for them, it's a game. I mean, guys, think about it, guys. They have nothing to lose. So why not try the game? For us, we have everything to lose. And for those who think that they can outsmart a manipulator, it's not going to happen, guys. These guys are pros. They have all day to observe, to watch you. They have all day to find the perfect game that fits you, your vulnerability. And what people don't realize is those vulnerabilities get exposed when we face certain situations that we don't know how to react to. There could be situations that we create on our own. There could be situations that just magically pop up. And there could be situations that they create. But there's a game for everyone. And it starts when you allow that inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role in any capacity. Starts when an inmate's able to isolate you. Starts when an inmate is able to pull you away from your peers and bring them closer to them and their peers. They want to be your resource, especially when you're going through situations that are ambiguous. They want to be the ones you go to. And I'm going to share a story with you at the end of this intro to explain how real it is and to kind of talk about the motivations that push you forward, even though something inside of you is telling you, I shouldn't be going this direction. A little story about me is when I wanted to get into the administrative level, I wanted to go back to school and get a degree. So what type of degree would fit what I wanted to be? And I saw a lot of people taking that public administration. So a lot of people jumping into criminal justice. For some reason, I wanted to take psychology. So I did. There was a class that I had to take in order for me to get my degree called social psych. And that class to me totally changed the way I view people. You know, a lot of the times I used to look at people
and blame people for the situations that they find themselves in, including dirty officers. And again, it's not to negate or minimize their responsibility, what they have done. Don't think I'm doing that. I just want you guys to understand the game. In order for us to do that, we have to put responsibility on the people that play the game, like the ones that instigated, which is the population. And sometimes we got to see their target as a victim, because that's the game. Well, their consequences are their consequences, but we need to learn from this. So with that said, I learned that people are a product of their environment. That when situations occur, those situations can overpower us and make us make decisions that we wouldn't normally make. So when you have people that are able to control their environment, there's a good chance that they can control you. It's the environment that puts the pressure on the people that make the people do foolish things. And that comes across with the process. The process that you must identify so you can go ahead and put up the right shield so it doesn't happen to you. And the first thing you have to say to yourself is, it can happen to me. I can be vulnerable at any moment because situations can arise that I'm not going to be prepared for. And I really have to take time to see what's going on in that situation. But more importantly, how do I feel about that situation? The insight. And you have to be honest with yourself. You have to look at yourself and even ask questions like, am I too gullible? Do I trust the inmate population? Do I have a hard time saying no? Am I consistent with the rules that I'm supposed to enforce? It's a load of questions that you need to ask yourself that can provide you insight into who you are and how to survive in this profession. But anyway, when I was taking the social psychology course, I was reading the influences of persuasion. And there were 6 rules or 6 laws, which kind of salesmen use to influence people into buying things that they normally wouldn't buy. It's a manipulation. In social psychology, they call it influence. In corrections, I call it manipulation. And the funny thing about manipulation, guys, is manipulation is a two-way street. You cannot be manipulated unless you allow it to happen. So the fact that you're taking the course is telling me I will not let it happen to me. So bravo. Great job. Because that's the right incentive to take this course. And for those that may be taking it for any other reason outside of what I just said, think it over. Look into yourself. This course has value, but you have to believe in what's being presented. And at the end of the day, you have to internalize the information I'm giving you. Because this information is not only going to save your career, could save your life, could save your peers' life, could help maintain the safety and security of that correctional facility. So anyway, when this gentleman did his undercover work and tried to see how it was to be a salesman and all the different levels of influence that forced people to buy stuff that they naturally wouldn't buy, he came down with 6 reasons why people do it. Now, guys, I'm going to devote a video to each one of these reasons, among other things that we're going to be discussing. But I want you to keep in the back of your mind these 6 reasons of why people do what they don't think they would normally do. Now, in his case, it was buying something. In my case, it's a lot more severe. Again, he said influence, I said manipulate. This is about doing something that could jeopardize your job, your life, well-being of the facility. Ultimately, it could be criminal. And again, we're talking about people that went into this profession with a good intent and made bad choices. So one of the things he noticed...
The friends room will be closing in 15 minutes, and there are only 15 minutes remaining to process new library cards.
So the one thing he noticed was consistency. The need for us to be consistent. Now, guys, I'm going to explore each topic in a separate video, but remember that. we have a need to be consistent. He also talked about social validation, which is basically the need for us to look at others to validate what we're doing. And again, I'm going to tell you how inmates can use that against us. He also talks about authority, how people with a sense of authority can get us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. And I bet you're thinking right now, how do inmates have a sense of authority over staff? It's about perception. I'm going to get to that. I'm going to tell you when we do that video how inmates can be perceived to have a sense of authority over staff. It's a very good chapter because this actually also focuses on our supervisors as well. Supervisors can make us vulnerable. The next thing he talks about is likeness. Basically, it's harder for us to tell people that we like no. And I'll talk about how inmates can foster a connection between us and them in an effort to pull us out of our prescribed role, connecting with us on something personal and taking us out of our profession. He also talks about scarcity. Scarcity for a salesman would be, hey, you got to buy this now because tomorrow it won't be on sale. For manipulation, this applies when they know that someone's in a desperate situation and they give them that one-time offer. And the last thing he discusses is reciprocity, or the feeling of obligation. This falls into the quick pro quo, I do for you, you do for me, throwing out keywords like favor. I'll do you this favor, I'll only do it for you, because they know when they say words like that, there'll be a feeling to return that. We'll have a whole chapter on that as well. We're also going to talk about isolation. We're going to talk about group dynamics. I'm going to briefly go over group dynamics in a second with my story. But in the end, guys, we're going to discuss the process, because all this, everything that we're going to discuss is about the process. What is slow moving, what is subtle. What we don't realize is taking us down a wrong path until it's too late. It's too late. And everything that we're going to discuss is going to put a picture of that process. And then all you have to do is, when you're feeling that conflict, you need to recognize that and you need to correct it. You have to look into yourself. I want to tell you guys a story before we go into the second video. And this story is important to me because this is the first day of my career, and this is what started me on this journey to understanding the process. I've been in the field for 18 years. And since day one, I started this journey in understanding the process, because I was one of those people in the academy that thought it couldn't happen to me. You got to be a fool to bring something in. But again, my mind was totally on the outcome, and I was totally ignoring the game that people play. You know, guys, there's two good books on the market you guys should definitely check out. One is called Games Criminals Play by Diane Boston and Bud Allen. And the other book is The Art of the Con by Gary Cornelius. These books identify the process as well, and they relate to real life scenarios. And we'll be discussing Down in the Duck, which can be found in Games Criminals Play, because Down in the Duck relates to consistency and commitment. So if you guys read the story and you're familiar with it, I'm going to tell you why that works. How that inmate was to create that leverage and ultimately turn that officer to doing something criminal. Let me tell you my story, guys. A story where it almost happened to me, but thank God I looked into myself and knew something was wrong, and I listened to myself. Because it's the process, and again, it's not surface, so a lot of it's ambiguous, and you have to be able to recognize it and then act. Because no one's telling you it's happening. It's not that easy. You have to feel it. You have to sense it and trust your body to know it's happening. You know, when I first got on the job, My first day, I was in a housing unit, female inmates, open dorm. But man, I was confident, guys. I had understood policy pretty well. Not a lot of discretion. It's my first day on the job, but I knew policy. The officers welcomed me for the most part. Supervisors were good. I had resources, man. Couldn't fail. Inmates would try to come up and say, hey, Gangi, you need anything I can help you? No, I don't need you guys. I'm good. I got my peers. I'll go to them if I need anything. But thank you. Appreciate it. Do my tours. Things are going good. Comes close to the end of the shift. Again, great shift, confident, loving the job, loving this profession. I'm doing my rounds. An inmate comes out of the dorm and says, hey, Gangi, I feel threatened. I feel threatened by another inmate on my wing. So what do I have to do? Well, by policy and procedure, because at this point, that's all I know. Don't have much discretion. Take the inmate out, sit her in the public area so I can identify what the threat is and call a supervisor. Want that supervisor to come to the unit and help with me to deal with the situation, because that's what I was told to do in the academy, and that's what policy says. The clock says 5 to 10. It's 5 to 10 p.m. That means the shift is almost over. So most likely the supervisor was in their car getting ready to go home when he heard from me call him on the radio. Supervisor came into the unit and he was very upset. The moment he entered into this unit, he started yelling, screaming, belittling me, because one thing is I called him when he was in the vehicle. Second thing is because I was a rookie. Now I'm going to stick him with this bullshit paperwork instead of me being able to handle this on my own. I got up off my chair, met him halfway, and he's still yelling at me. And I'm just taking it in. Now, mind you guys, I was on a high. I was feeling good. But this dropped me. It was a rapid fall. I'm looking around the unit. The inmate that's in the public area, she's looking, hearing everything. I'm losing my sense of credibility. How do you expect me to be effective and run a unit when you just took my credibility right in front of this inmate? But also, it's a dorm. The inmates are coming out, they're smiling, they're smirking, they're laughing. I'm losing my credibility, and it's rapid. Again, when you embarrass someone in a unit and the inmates can see it, that person is seen as being less effective, less credible. Supervisor told me to leave the unit, didn't even ask me for my paperwork. And when I left my unit, I was totally opposite of when coming in. My head was down. I was upset. I hated that man. And in turn, I started hating the profession. As I'm driving home, I'm thinking about, what did I do wrong? Couldn't understand what I did wrong. I couldn't find a way to justify what this gentleman did, and that's what I'm doing. I have to find a cause. I have to find a reason. That's me trying to be insightful. I'm trying to find some resolution. Wasn't any, because I did what I did. I did what I had to do, what policy told me to do. This was just a supervisor that was irate and angry because he wanted to go home, and he chose to embarrass me in front of everyone. Next day, as I'm going to work, I'm dreading it. Stomach hurts. I just don't want to be here. Check the schedule. Lo and behold, I'm scheduled for that unit. The same unit I was just embarrassed in front of. The same unit that now I don't even feel effective. I don't even feel that these inmates will even respect me because of how he treated me. So I enter that unit, and the inmates, they just come up to me. Gangi, what happened yesterday? I was messed up. I'm sorry, man. That supervisor had no right doing that. And I'm sucking it in, guys, because I need to redeem myself. And when you're embarrassed, guys, you want to redeem yourself in front of the people that you were embarrassed in front of. It's a natural reaction. It's not a purposeful behavior. It's a motivation. It's hidden. And here I am being motivated to embrace what they're saying. And they're doing it, guys. They're saying what I need to hear, because as they're saying it, it's lifting me up because I was so far down. But they messed up. Messed up. Thank God they did. So as they're telling me, hey, what this supervisor did was wrong, he shouldn't have did this, he shouldn't have talked to you that way, they started generalizing it out. But that's how correctional officers are. That's how your peers are, Gangi. That's how all supervisors are. And I'm like, well, I didn't have that experience with everybody. It's not how I felt. My concern was about that individual. So I started looking into myself and I started feeling the conflict. I don't agree with that. I agree with the concern I had with the one person, but I wasn't generalizing that to everybody because I didn't have that with everyone. So that's when I woke up and I said, hey, you know what, guys? This isn't for you to discuss. Step off. Step off. But there was that one moment where I wanted that. I wanted to feel good because I had just gotten embarrassed in front of them. So I needed my sense of credibility back, my sense of I could be effective. And in my mind, they were saying the right things because he was the reason why I couldn't be seen as credible. So we have to attack him in order for me to lift my spirits. But then when they started generalizing out, you know what they were doing, guys? They were pulling me away from my peers. They were putting me in a situation where I'm kind of stuck in the middle from my main resources. And eventually what would happen here, guys, is once they isolate me, and we'll talk about this in the next video, I go to them. And they strengthen that bond between us by making me feel more animosity toward the people that I know are supposed to have my back. Again, anytime I'd be put in an ambiguous situation, I would be forced to go to them because I'd have nowhere else to go. It's divide and conquer. And we're going to explore that again in the second video. You know, when that supervisor got ready to retire, I got a chance to see him. Now, mind you, we had interactions a few times, but with that said, nothing overpowers that initial interaction. That interaction I'll never forget because I was highly emotional and memories attached to emotion. And said his goodbye, and right before he left, I said, hey, Sarge, let me ask you something, man. I don't know if you remember this. He goes, what's up? You remember my first day? And he's like, how would I remember your first day? And I said, oh, well, I remember it. Told him where I was, told him the story I just told you guys.
The library will be closing in 30 minutes, and the Friends Room is now closed. There will be no more library cards issued at this time. Now is the time for children to phone home for a ride.
I told him where I was, told him the interaction we had that day, and I told him how it made me feel. I said, when you tossed me out of that unit, you made me feel so vulnerable that day that I dreaded the job. I felt I had no credibility. I hated you, man. And the next day when I came back in, I embraced the positivity the inmates gave me. And they gave it to me in an effort to make me have more animosity towards you. You create a situation for me that made me vulnerable. And do you know that if I was to do something foolish, let's say 3 to 6 months down the line, no one would ever go back and look at that initial day as to what caused it? All they would care about is the outcome. That's what they would care about. The fact that I brought something in. But they wouldn't care about the process. What started it? And it started either 3 or 6 months ago when you yelled at me in that unit. And you made me feel less than what I was, and you gave the inmates a chance to pounce. You gave them a situation that they were able to take control of or make an attempt to take control of. And then you just left me. I don't even know what I was expecting from him. I wasn't expecting him to say sorry. I just wanted him to know. And when it was all said and done, all he said to me was, I can't believe you held on to that bullshit for that long. That was it. So even as a supervisor with that many years experience, he doesn't understand the game, the process, how his actions created the perfect situation for the inmate now to pounce. Because I was vulnerable. And they were doing whatever they can to build that animosity to that sergeant, to that group, to the point where I hate them so much that now I'm willing to accept them. That's the hidden motivations, guys. There's a game for everybody. It's all about observing, understanding how people react to situations. And for people to say that, well, that person got manipulated, that would never happen to me, because the game that manipulated him wasn't designed for you. But there's a game designed for everyone. Just that one wouldn't work on you. And the inmate probably wouldn't try that one on you. But trust and believe, if the situation occurs, they're going to be there. They're going to employ that game. And at that point, it's going to be a game designed for you. And the whole time you're going to be thinking, nope, could never happen to me, while you're being taken down that path of conflict. And because you're not going to have enough insight to check yourself, because you think you're not vulnerable, you'll be in handcuffs, being escorted out, still thinking, can't happen to me. It's crazy. But it's that process. And that's what we're going to explore in the next course of videos. This is the intro. We have a lot to cover. And I hope you take, if anything, from the end of this video, remember that word, process. Every letter is in capital, 3 exclamation points. See you in video 2.
All right, so all you guys are muted. Let me unmute you guys. Make sure you're unmuted. So before we go to the next video, I wanted to just have a couple of thoughts here I wanted to connect with before we move on. And I want to make sure that we kind of don't cross into the other videos, because that was the intro video. So it's just introducing us to the thoughts that are later going to come out. But the key here is process. And one of the questions, now guys, we have 8 more videos to go, but real quick, one of the questions that me myself asked, and I think it's a great question, is, so in case where CEO was manipulated, they never fully investigated to go back into the process. And I believe it's not as looked into as it should, or it's definitely at least ignored by most who just focus on the outcome, which is very outcome driven. But Russ, what's your thoughts on the process? How dangerous is the process? And you're muted, Russ. There you go.
Right, you said you unmuted me.
I got you. I thought I did.
No, so the process, is just, the way that we get from point A to point B. What I often discuss with people is that, and I'll tell you quite honestly, there's a lot of staff that out there that don't understand what point A and point B are. Point A and point B do not have to be corruption. It does not have to be even necessarily malfeasance. It doesn't have to be something that completely destroys security or that breaks the law. It can just be putting you enough off your game, or giving enough of a favor, or enough of an action or inaction to someone to allow them to breach security, to be able to hide a knife, to be able to slip a cell phone by you or whatever. It doesn't have to be having sex with an inmate or bringing in contraband. What I'm just talking about is manipulation. There is a point at which sometimes manipulation can cross into that, but it doesn't have to be that. So when we talk about the process, and I literally have officers tell me this pretty often. They say, well, it can never happen to me, because I would never, violate policy. I would never go against the law. And I just have to shake my head. It's like, do you not understand what this process is? When you're being taken from point A to point B, it doesn't necessarily even cross that. You don't have to go that far. The point of the manipulation is not necessarily to get you fired. They would like that, but I would say that most of the manipulation that takes place stops far short of that. They can't get that far that often, or we would be always at that point. And you're muted.
Damn it. I saw it too. Hey, Joe, you can unmute right now. We're good. We'll just mute when the video show. But guys, the scary thing about this all, guys, is that the only person that can really notice the process is the person that's feeling it. If they allow themselves to, something doesn't feel right, if they listen to their gut, it's usually the person that's happening to. Again, from the people on the outside, we may get a sense of it all, But the person that really needs to identify the process when it's happening is the person that's going through it, because usually it's going to be a feeling of conflict, and we'll get to that. It's going to be a feeling of behaviors that go against your beliefs. And that's something that obviously is internal. Again, we may notice certain things, but really the person that's being targeted, and as the game, progresses, they're the ones that have to have that insight and say, something doesn't feel right, and not ignore it, not minimize it. And then the other thing we'll get into a little bit later is also situational, and we'll get to that. But I wanted to go with Joe too about the process. Joe, what's your thoughts on how even our own peers, because when you have people that say it can never happen to them, I think that they actually ignore the specifics of what type of game is being played based on the individual who's been targeted. Because most of the people that work in this profession, when they say it really can't happen to them, they're more focused on, well, I'll never bring in a phone, or I'll never have sex with an inmate, or I'll never bring in contraband. It's like, okay, I get that that's the final outcome, but what you're minimizing is what made that person decide to do that. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the minute you walk through the gates, or walk into a pod or a cell block area, you're being sized up. I mean, right off the bat, the minute you walk in. And just because you don't bring in a cell phone, you don't bring in drugs or tobacco or major contraband, doesn't mean that you can't be manipulated. Everybody can be manipulated. It starts off with the slight things. There's so many different forms of manipulation in the prison environment that we could literally talk for a week just on all the manipulation practices that convicts can use against staff members. It could be as something simple. For example, a SEG environment. Hey boss, the guy 2 cells down. He doesn't get any money from his people. He doesn't eat real well. You mind giving him this soup packet? You take the soup packet thinking you're doing something innocent or doing a good deed, unbeknownst to, you just helped a convict pay off a sports bet. Manipulation could be, however slight. It's the little things that lead to the big things.
Yeah. And guys, before we go into the next video, me, myself, I think, no, was it me, myself? No, it's Sierra. She mentions Tier Talk with Anthony Gangi. So in your opinion, do you think the experience outweighs education? 100%, especially in this world. Education is great. Don't get me wrong. It can add, but can never, ever supersede experience. For me, in my world of corrections, working 20 years, I would choose somebody if I had to choose between the two. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like to have both. But if I had to choose between experience and education, especially in this world, experience 100%. True evaluated experience, not experience for the sake of experience, true evaluated experience. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? And then Joe, and then we'll go to the next video.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Experience can give you things that the whole, education part really can't. Not that that's not important. One of the things, I've really prided myself on is, my ability to, read people and understand body language and stuff like that. And then this last week, we had Sean Grogan come in. And I mean, that guy's just a master though. And he has the practical experience like I do, but he also has the education under some masters. But I'll guarantee you that no matter how much he studied underneath guys like that are, true masters of it, and, have, walked both sides, done the experience and done the education. If he didn't have the practical experience like I have, then, the amount that he'd be able to talk about and, bring to the table would be severely diminished. Now, I was just like eating it up and really wowed though, because I learned a lot from that guy, and I'm reading his book right now. So you can't just throw the education part out, but the experience part is really the proof in the pudding of whether or not you are a master of that education experience.
And what's your thoughts on that, Joe? Do you believe that experience should supersede education? And okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, education gives you your basis and your platform, but in the prison environment, experience there's no substitution for experience. Until you experienced it, you really haven't learned anything. You know, we can, like I said, you can talk about it all day long, and it gives you the basic building blocks of a prison environment. But until you actually see it for yourself and experience manipulation attempts, yeah, experience will teach you better than anything out there.
Yeah, and guys, so we're going to go to the next video. Now, this is where you want to get your notes, because this is where we start to really discuss the theories, and we will apply them to the stories that are kind of our own experiences here. So let me, well, before I mute, if you guys want to mute yourself, I'll get ready to do the second video. We'll fly through this a little bit. All right, so the second video is going to be about isolation, divide, and conquer. This one's about 14 minutes. Again, this is where they start to utilize their tactics. So this one, we're going to focus on isolation, divide, and conquer. And then, guys, when you watch this, think about how this could play out outside of prison with people that you may know that could be manipulative. Okay, hold on.
All right, thank you guys for checking out part 2 of our inmate manipulation course, situational awareness and insight. Guys, no matter what videos we go through, this has got to be in the back of your mind through each video. This is how important these terms are: situational awareness and insight. If you go back to my story in the last video where I needed help, I called for the sergeant. He went in and he yelled at me. And the next day when I had that unit, the inmates knew I was vulnerable and they were quick to pounce. It was the inmates that had situational awareness, but it was me that had the insight. And thank God, when I felt the need to do something that was in conflict, I looked at myself, and then I looked at the situation I was in. I said, hey, something doesn't feel right here. And eventually I did what I could to ease that conflict, push those inmates away. The funny thing is, when you have a supervisor that has a lot of years experience, and he's coming in and he's embarrassing me, and he's just yelling without having any control of who he is or what he's doing, where's his situational awareness? Was he aware of what he was doing to me at that time? Was he aware of the situation that he was putting me in? Was he aware how when he yelled at me in that unit, he made a really good opportunity for the inmates to pounce on me? And also, where was his insight? Probably still in his car. Came into the unit yelling at me, aggravated, should have checked himself. He had no idea what he was doing. And unfortunately, when he has no idea of what he was doing, he had no idea of the situation that he was creating. So again, guys, in the backdrop, situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. Pay attention to the situations that you're in and listen to your gut about how they're taking in that situation. Have that insight. Now, guys, we mentioned this briefly yesterday, and I just want to go over it a little bit more, kind of explain it a little bit more in detail. One thing is going to be divide and conquer. We talked about that briefly because remember, guys, when the supervisor had yelled at me and the inmates started to play me out, they were trying to build animosity between me and my peers. So there was an effort to take me away from my peers and make them my resource. And that's part of that divide and conquer. But there's another thing that's part of that as well. And I call it isolation. And this is just a one-way isolation. What I mean by that, guys, is that they're isolating me from my peers. So again, I want to explore that first story again, because that's what matters. This is where you see someone being motivated to do something that was never their intent. Okay, so when you look at the divide and conquer method, you have these inmates that knew that I was embarrassed. They knew that I was vulnerable. They knew it. They saw it the day before. They saw how I had left that unit. So they thought in their mind, hey, when this guy comes back in, we have the ability now to lift him up. We have the ability now to comfort him. And he's going to be receptive of that. Remember, guys, at the beginning of the story, when the inmate asked me for help, I was good. My peers were good. I had no issues. That was an easy no for me. Don't need your help. I got this. Got it. And I'm sure there'll be talk at that moment where the inmates like, this guy's by the book is going to be a little bit harder to turn. But then all of a sudden that situation comes in, and that person at the beginning of the shift is no longer that same person at the end. So now when the inmates start to pounce, their thing is this: how do we isolate this employee from his peer staff? Because now, guys, I need my peers. I need my support staff. They're the ones that are going to protect me. They're the ones that are going to save my life. But just in a brief moment, when that person yelled at me, when that supervisor came in and yelled at me, that was a major divide. Now, the thing is here was they were going to take that divide and they were going to go ahead and do what? They were going to go ahead and build animosity between me and that supervisor and eventually use that as a way for me to build animosity between me and the rest of staff. Now, think about that, guys. I'm slowly being moved away from the group that I need to be in. So just to kind of draw a picture for you, because I think this will explain it better. If we have two groups, and let's just say this is custody staff, and let's just say this is the inmates, right? The next day, when the inmates are coming in after I've been yelled at, I'm in the middle. I'm here. They've pulled me out. So thank God I had enough insight to reinforce my connection to come back here. Thank God that inmate had said, hey, that's how all custody is like, because that's where the inmate messed up, because that wasn't my experience. But the thing is if I would have fell into that trap, if I would have started continuing to believe that, yes, custody's bad too because they're no different than that supervisor, because that's what the inmates were doing. They were building that connection between that supervisor that I despised and hoping I would carry that same feeling over to the rest of my peers. What that would have done now was that would have pushed me closer and closer to that group, which would ultimately made me lose my connection to this group. And they will embrace me. And they're doing that because they built animosity here between me and them, which only strengthens this potential connection. But again, I'm in the middle. Now, here's a couple of things, guys, when you're in the middle. And by the way, I'm new. So for me, every day I could be going through ambiguous situations that I don't know how to handle. And now that I'm in the middle, which way do I want to go? Technically, I want to go this way. I never want to go that way. But when I'm in the middle and they're pulling me in, and what they're doing is they're isolating me from my support staff, and I start despising them, I don't even start to look that way. What I do now is I start looking this way. And what happens here is they become my resource. It's a group dynamic. They become the one that I embrace. That means that anytime, guys, that I'm caught in an ambiguous situation, I'm going to be going this way because I can't go here. But guys, that's how they're controlling me. But don't forget that they're also controlling that perspective of how custody sees me. What they're going to start doing is when other custody members come into the unit, they may get a little closer to me. Or who knows, they could be working some angle out with the other custody people saying, hey, yo, Gangi does not like you guys. They could be playing even a further divide. So now not only am I avoiding custody, but custody's not making any attempt to find me. That just moves me further and further here. You know, it's a very, very dangerous game. But at the end of the day, you have to be aware of which direction you're being pulled and where you're going to go for your resources. Day one for me was pushing that inmate aside. But after I went through that situation, there could have been a potential where I could have went from the middle all the way to the inmate side. All because of that one moment of vulnerability, that building of animosity, and the perception of how I'm close to those inmates. how custody sees me. And then again, maybe a few inmates reinforcing that by talking to the other custody, my peers, and maybe just building some animosity as well. So they're just isolating me and isolating me. And in the end, here's this big circle. These are all the inmates right here. And here I am. Done. I am done. There's another thing too, guys, we may not know. Now, mind you, this isolation, this divide and conquer happened for two reasons. Because the sergeant set up a situation for it to happen, and the inmates took advantage of that opportunity. Correct? But there's another way it could happen as well. Sometimes we have employees that are disgruntled. They're negative. And a lot of us don't want to be around those employees. So what happens here is the inmates are watching and they see that we don't interact with this employee. And what happens is this employee is isolating themselves. So we have to do the opposite. When you have that negative employee, when you have that disgruntled employee, we have to find ways to embrace them. Because if we don't, that negative employee is all alone, surrounded by a lot of inmates who are hungry. They need to see that connection. You got to realize something. One of the tests that inmates do is to see how connected people are. Sometimes you'll have an inmate that will come up to you, hey, can I tell you something in confidence? And then when you listen, they go to see where you go with that. Are you going to tell your peers? Are you going to tell your supervisor? Or when you come in the next day, nothing happened? It's all a test. When you have that isolated employee, even if they're tough to be around, it's good for the inmates to see that other staff is interacting with them. Let them see that connection. And if anything, double up on that need to connect with them. And explain to that person, hey, listen, what you're doing, you're putting yourself out on a ship. We need to be able to connect. Sometimes that happens between departments. I mean, there's a lot of places where civilian and custody don't get along. And now what we have here is just two departments that just have this animosity for whatever reason. Most likely it's a personality conflict that now been generalized to the whole department. So now you have just this divide, and inmates see that. They can play both sides. They can easily play both sides. That's why it's very important that we reinforce our connection. Let the inmates see that civilians and custody or sworn staff and non-sworn staff are working together as one to complete the mission. Let them see those interactions. Let them know that at no time ever is one of our employees left alone. Ever. The reason why we had to explore that divide and conquer, guys, is because it happens all the time. It happens all the time. In order for manipulation to work, there has to be an attempt from an inmate to isolate you from your peers. They have to be that level of resource. No different than a cult, guys. Cults, what they do is out of your circle that can have a negative influence against what they're trying to do. It is a serious game. And once it happens, guys, and once you're in that circle, you're in. You're in. So again, what helped me was I recognized it when I was kind of in the middle. And then when the inmate tried to generalize the animosity towards everyone, I was able to pull myself back to where I needed to be. I was able to go from the middle back to where I needed to be. And that took two things. It's what I said right at the beginning. Insight and situational awareness. And remember I said something about the process being subtle and slow moving? When that was happening, it was my insight that identified the process. It was my situational awareness that identified the process. And for that sergeant that yelled at me, no situational awareness, no insight, he left me vulnerable to the process. It's crazy. It really is. Guys, this is the end of video number 2. Remember, this video is meant to be the backbone of the dialogue that we're going to go through. So we talked about the process. We also talked about insight and situational awareness. In the next video, we're going to talk about how we justify our directives to the inmate population. What justifications are weak and what justifications are strong. All right, guys, I'll see you in video 3.
Sorry about that. So I want you to know something. I like when I go see you in video 3. I worked hard for that. That was a good one. Hey, guys, a couple of things I want to discuss here. And I agree with Alicia. Isolation is critical manipulation. If you're alone, you're more vulnerable. And we're definitely going to be talking about that. But one of the things I want to talk about, I'll go with Joe first and Russ, is that video to me is definitely something that is powerful because I think that is pretty much one of the main components of any game an inmate's going to play is they're going to look to isolate staff. They're going to look to divide and conquer. And that really is going to be based on either situations we create, they create, or it could just happen. I mean, we even talked about the disgruntled employee who's isolating themselves. And here we are. We don't want to be near them, but technically we're providing a better environment for them to pounce on that employee. But I want to talk about situational awareness and insight. Isn't that a good tool to have? What's your thoughts, Joe? Both tools.
Absolutely. Absolutely a good tool to have. You know, I know in my 30 years, I've worked for supervisors that were exactly like the one you described that, you know, had no situational awareness and there was no afterthought of, man, I screwed up and I put that boss in a bad place. You know, and it was kind of one of the things that prompted me to become a supervisor because I told myself, man, I can do better than that. You know, the main thing is you don't, as a supervisor, you don't want to, you know, manipulation's already there. You know, it's already easy. You know, you don't want to make it any easier for the convicts and you don't want to make it any worse for your staff. So, you know, why the hell would you even put your staff in that predicament to begin with? And, you know, I don't know, it's absolutely nuts that, you know, the manipulation game is as bad as it is. And, you know, we need to ensure that our staff are not only aware, but I mean, it doesn't take a supervisor. It could be another correctional officer working beside that correctional officer. You know, they can pull them in and say, hey, look, you know, you may be setting yourself up for failure. You know, it's a team thing. It's a village thing. You know, it's not just one person raising an officer. It's the whole village raising the officer. And that's why, you know, us sticking together is, you know, of utmost importance. I mean, because we're basically all that we have. And we need to be there to look out for each other, good, bad, and, you know, and to tell each other the good and the bad, you know, when we're doing a good job or when we're fixing to screw up.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something. I love what you just said, too, about the whole village really working to cultivate that new officer. Because mind you, guys, when this first scenario started, I was new. I was vulnerable. So having said that, I don't have positive experiences to build from. So I am going to be looking for help. I'm going to be dealing with a lot of ambiguity. And for that supervisor to do that, they may not have realized how vulnerable that made me. And then again, at the very end, when the person really just didn't know how it affected me, that also showed you how much insight they had in the situations that they create on others, especially a new rookie like myself. Hey, Russ, what's your thoughts on, you know, I know we talked about insight and situational awareness, but that isolation of staff, that divide and conquer, isn't that something that, you know, if an inmate's going to manipulate, that's something that they have to be successful at, correct?
Absolutely. And when you really look at what goes on, you know, just, you know, on a day-to-day basis inside whatever unit you're in, you know, we have these individuals, you know, they come to us new. All right. And so because they're new, they're obviously more vulnerable. We should recognize that. That's why we should, you know, come in and we should be welcoming to them. We shouldn't be standoffish, you know, and I've talked about my own first day experiences plenty of times. But, you know, being able to welcome them in, and especially, you know, there's always going to be some, you know, outlier individuals who maybe are a little bit, socially awkward, or maybe they just don't have a good work history yet, and they just haven't been in the outside world very much. And not only have they not been in the outside world much, they certainly haven't been in a place like a prison or a jail where you have some real true master manipulators. And so this is the type of thing I always like to get to where we talk about words, and we talk about what we're doing on a conscious and intentional level. And so, when I'm out there and I'm doing my thing with, contraband or something, I constantly think, what am I doing right now? Well, I'm doing contraband intervention, right? What am I doing when I'm out there and I'm hitting the gangbangers, and validating them stuff? Well, I'm doing gang suppression. So some of the other things, obviously, that I'm doing are things like, that I'm countering. Could be like counter manipulation. I'm stopping myself from being manipulated. I'm stopping, others from, other inmates from manipulating maybe this new person. And so I think about it just along with all those other counter things we do: counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and all of the buzzwords you hear. So it's an important thing to have a way to think about what you can do, not just about your own potential for being manipulated, but for that of your neighbor, for your coworker out there, especially the newer ones.
Right. And guys, sorry. There we go. Guys, as we move forward, so this next part is, to me, definitely vital for us to be effective in corrections, but this could also definitely play on the outside, because this is a no meaning a no. Let's just say that. How do you really make a no a no? How do you make it believable? And this next part is what we call how we justify the why. And I don't want to dig too much, and I'm going to let the video play it out. But guys, this is very key in regards to really making sure that what you're saying, the message you're getting out, especially when you're saying no, clearly states a no, and you don't commit to anything or say anything that minimizes the power behind that no. And that kind of deals with the justification. So let's go to the next video now. Bear with me. Touch that.
All right, how you guys doing? This is video 3. My name is Anthony Gangi, and we're going to be talking about manipulating the why. Now, what does that mean? And we're going to talk about that. This is going to be a big portion of the video. But I want to let you guys know that along the way, I may give out some tidbits, things that come to me later on that I figure I just may want to throw your way. It's not enough to focus a whole video on, but still definitely very important information. Like, even though we're talking about manipulating the why, and I'll explain what that means, this really deals with communication, our interactions with the inmate population. And this is going to make me want to touch on something that we discussed in videos 2 and 1, and also just to reinforce and make sure we're mindful of, where we're going in regards to when we're communicating with an inmate, how we have to have that level of control. But before we do that, I've got 15 questions here. Now, these 15 questions are going to pretty much be a backbone throughout these videos that we cover. And these are questions to provide us with more insight on ourselves. And that's key, guys. Remember, insight and situational awareness will give us the defense needed to protect us during that process. And remember, guys, the process is invisible. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. So guys, I want you to think about these 15 questions. Ask yourself these questions every day. Ask yourself these questions every time you have an interaction. Whatever it is, these questions are meant to give you a better insight into self. First question, am I overly friendly or familiar? Do I think of inmates at home? Do I appear gullible? Do inmates consider me too trusting? Am I excessively sympathetic? Is my demeanor timid? And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Is my enforcement of rules consistent? Do I handle compliments in a non-professional or embarrassing manner? Do I share personal problems with inmates? Have I been known to forget to check the validity of an inmate's information and/or story? Do I sometimes let issues slide that should be addressed immediately? Now, this next question here is definitely what we're covering today. That's the focus on manipulating the why. Do I have difficulty with command, control, and saying no? Do I circumvent minor rules? Can I be made to feel obligated? Am I easily distracted? You know, guys, in today's corrections, we interact with the inmates a lot more than we ever did before. So we need to make sure that we're in control with those communications that we have, however forced, spontaneous, or prepared. If we are not prepared or take a second to prepare ourselves during those spontaneous conversations, we don't know where that inmate could be taking us. We don't know that. So having said that, we have to be on point. We have to be prepared of what this inmate is trying to do. What is their motivation? Why are we having this dialogue? What's motivating this inmate to talk to me at this moment? And the reason why sometimes that could be tough is, remember, guys, I can teach us manipulation. I can teach us how to look for it, to identify that process, but you still have these policies and procedures that say if A happens, B must happen, which means that it gives a chance for an inmate to find a weakness in a policy, which could have been, based on good intent, but they know that if they say this, we have to do this. So we have to be able to control that reaction to some extent. So we're not 100% predictable, which means that we have to exhaust all levels of questions until we can understand what that motivation is for that inmate to do what it is that they want to do. And guys, when inmates that choose to manipulate or inmates that lie, when they go to tell a story, they usually do it in generalities as opposed to specifics. So we can't run on generalities. We have to exhaust it down and tire them out until they give us specifics. That's the key. And again, being in control of that dialogue means that we're driving that vehicle. At any time I feel that this person is trying to take the wheel and take me to somewhere I don't want to go, I'm going to step back, rethink my plan, come back again. You do not get a hold of the vehicle that I'm driving. I am in control of all dialogue. If I ask you a question, you give me an answer. You don't ask me another question. That's how this dialogue works. That's how our communication works. If at any time we're taken off track, we have a problem because we're not going to know where we're going. And the destination, I will guarantee you, is not where you want to be. So the most important thing I can tell you right now is try to control that communication. And that's going to be part of what we're talking about now, which is called manipulating the why. What does that mean? I mean, what am I saying when I'm saying manipulating the why? This why is our justification for why we do what we do. It's our justification for the directives that we give the inmate. It's a justification for the no's we give the inmate. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't have to justify that to an inmate. There's no need to. But the key is, though, we do have to justify it to ourselves, because we have to have a belief in what we're providing to the inmate. That belief will carry over in our sense of authority. So if I don't believe in the directive, if I don't believe in the why I'm giving it, if I don't believe in the no that I'm telling the inmate, that's going to come across to the inmate. And the inmate's going to sense a level of weakness, and they're going to try to do what they can to challenge this. They're going to do what they can to challenge that why, because they think that I don't believe in the directive I'm providing, because I may have come off hesitant in giving the order, or my no was weak. But what confirms that weakness is how I justify why I'm giving that order. Now again, you don't have to give an inmate a justification. But I want to give you a hint, just in case you feel compelled to do so. I'm going to tell you where that justification has to come from. But the reason why I'm giving this dialogue is because I want you to know how we justify it in our own minds. What's going to give us the belief that will showcase the power of authority that we need, where inmates will say, hey, he's not the one to challenge. This guy's got a good mindset. Now, I'd like to share a story of how I thought about this, why this is an important topic to me. I remember there was an officer who inmates would always ask him personal information. What kind of car you drive? How many children do you have? Now, for me, it'd be no challenge for me to say, hey, none of your business, step off. I'm not falling for that. You don't need to know. But for him, it was a little bit more difficult. Now, I want to tell you something. If an inmate came up to me and said, how many children do you have? Actually, to give you good advice and just to maintain control, before I push him off, I would probably say, well, how many children do you think I have? Because I'm curious to see what this inmate knows and how they know it. But eventually, trust and believe, I have no hesitation of telling that inmate, step off. But with that said, for this person, they had a problem of telling that inmate it's none of their business. So what they would do is they would lie and say, I have 7 children, because the question would be, how many children do you have? I have 7 children. I have 9 children. I have 10 children. He would just constantly tell any inmate that asked him that he had a different number of children. And he thought this was funny, and he would share it with us. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, wow, a lot of inmates ask him. Like, it's not just the one inmate, it's a lot of inmates. So I'm thinking, like, if the first inmate was to ask me, I'm going to do what I can to make sure, or try my best to make sure that that doesn't happen again with that same inmate, but also with other inmates. I'm going to make sure that I make this inmate aware that that's a question that you do not ask me. That's a question I'm not willing to answer. So as he's telling these tall tales to all these different inmates, I went and I asked him, I said, hey, can I talk to you? He's like, what's up? I said, let me ask you a question. Why did you not stop it the first time? Like, you're telling me you're getting all these inmates asking you all these different personal questions. And even though you're giving them false information, why not put an end to it? Why not just tell the inmate it's none of your business and kind of let that word start to spread that, you know, you don't tolerate those type of questions, instead of this inconsistency about the different cars you own or the different amount of kids you have. I just don't see how you're doing anything to prevent it from happening again. And it took him a while to process, and then he wound up coming back and he said, hey, Gangi, you know what the funny thing is? As I'm laughing about what I'm telling these inmates, it's actually a lot harder for me to tell them it's none of their business. And that is tremendous insight, because we are social creatures. And it's hard for us to do something that we feel may not be socially acceptable, but this profession makes you do it, and you have to do it to survive. So sometimes you're going to have to tell somebody no. Sometimes you're going to have to tell somebody, no matter how nice they are or how nice they ask, it's none of your business. And for this person, it presented a conflict. Once this person realized this flaw in themselves, they stopped doing that. They stopped lying, and they started saying, hey, it's none of your business. And eventually, the inmate stopped asking. Once he made it known that he's not going to tolerate that, they stopped asking. So it was his insight that knew that maybe he is doing it wrong. And thank you, I'm happy that he listened to me when I said you should ask yourself that. What have you done to prevent other inmates from asking you that question? So when it comes to this, the manipulation of the why, if I give an inmate a directive and I tell the inmate, hey, you must do this, or you can't do this, or no, you're not going to do this, an inmate looks at how I give the order. If they feel there's a sense of weakness, they're going to ask me, well, why can't I do this? Or why can't you do this for me? Or why are you telling me no? So now how I respond is where they're going to choose to manipulate, if they can. They're manipulating the why. So with that said, we'll look at it this way, just in a simple drawing. This is me. This whole circle is me. This is external. I am not picking that up again. Actually, I am going to pick it up, because I may have to erase. There you go. external, and then we have the internal. So when an inmate asks you why they can't do something, or why you won't do nothing for me, or why you telling me no, we're going to give them two justifications, or one of two. One's either going to be an internal one, or one's going to be an external one. So real quick, and I'll give you guys a second to think about that. Which one is the stronger justification if you decide to justify it? But mind you, this is also how we justify it to ourselves. Which justification is going to give us belief into the directive we're providing, and which justification is not going to be a weak one to the inmates? So let's do the external first. I give you a directive, or I tell you not to do something, you're the inmate. I decide to answer the why, and the why is, well, the sergeant working today doesn't want you eating in the public area. Or the sergeant working today told me that you can't do it. Well, let's just think about that. That's an external piece. That means that I'm justifying my directive or my no based on an external source, the supervisor. So now an inmate listens to that. I haven't really done anything to stop them, because one day that sergeant's not going to be here. And that inmate's going to come back up and say, hey, Sergeant such and such isn't working today. Can I go ahead and eat in the public area? So that justified response, it's external. It's not a good response. It's not something that's going to hold weight. But now check out this internal one. Why can't I eat in the public area? Because I said so. Why? Because I said so. That's it. Because I said so. That shows I believe in the order, I believe in the directive, and it's harder for the inmate to challenge. So now, if you're in a position where the inmate tries to question your level of authority, ask yourself, are you giving the order because you've given the order? Or are you giving the order because someone else is putting pressure on you to give the order? The real answer is going to be, in order for you to be successful with your level of authority, you have to be able to realize that you need to recognize the order yourself. It's internal. It comes from you. That level of self will give you a stronger belief. And then when you have that level of authority, you need that belief to come out. It needs to be showcased in how you give that directive. And again, you can't manipulate this. You can't. I'm not giving you a road to go on. It's that broken record of no. No, because I said no. Why? Because I said no. Why? Because I said no. That's it. That broken record technique works. Because inmates will break you. They'll try their best to exhaust you and break you. Juveniles will do it. They'll keep on asking why, until you're just tired. But you have to stay firm with that no. And you have to make it known that it's you that's saying no, and it's not somebody else. Because if you keep on pointing to somebody else, it's weakness. I'm going to give you one other story. And the reason why this actually makes perfect sense to me outside of the other story I gave you. There was a female officer that was given a love note. Now, don't get me wrong, she did the right thing with the love note. She turned it in, she reported it, did everything she had to do. But when the inmate initially gave her the love note, and the inmate asked her, why is this love note inappropriate? Because she told him this love note's inappropriate, I'm going to report it. Her response was because policy and procedure forbids this relationship. That's an external response. That's not something that the inmate's going to think that she actually believes in. So that inmate now goes back to the other inmates and says, what? She would be with me if it wasn't for the rules. If it wasn't for policy and procedure. And that's their mindset. That's how they learn to justify their own behaviors. What she should have said was, because it's inappropriate. Why? Because I said it's inappropriate. Because I said it's unprofessional. Let the belief come from her and let it manifest its way out. But again, guys, to cut this video to a close, because it's just a real quick dialogue on this topic, the why matters. Let me just... How we justify this why matters. How we justify it to ourselves, and if need be, how we justify it to the inmate population matters. We need to make sure that we justify our response, that we believe in it, that it's us saying it, because that will come across. It's not external, it's internal. The internal why, or the internal justification. That eraser. All right, guys, so this wraps up video 3. Next video, we're going to be talking about the first law of influence. We're going to be talking about consistency, commitment. And that's kind of related to the story of downing a duck. I'm going to explain to you how downing a duck works. If you're not familiar with the story, I'm going to kind of breeze you through it real quick. But I'm going to talk about why the inmate was able to get leverage and why that officer chose the path they chose. As always, guys, thank you for watching my class. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in video 4.
All right, hold on. There you go. Hold on. All right. So, real quick, the next video, definitely have your notes on that one, because that's the most complicated one. We're going to talk about consistency, but we're going to talk about how downing a duck works. We're going to explain it all. But hey, Joe, real quick, I think Russ had to step off for a second. Hey, Joe, I know when they teach manipulation courses out in the academy, they don't do it this way. And the reason why I know that is because these are my experiences. So I can safely assume they don't teach it this way. And I know this may be one of the first times you're really going through it, because I don't think you've had a chance to see the video in its entirety. But I wanted to ask you about this, the why, how we justify what we do to ourselves, and obviously how that manifests out. But how important is the justification of that why when given a directive or an order?
Well, I mean, instinctively, just being human, when somebody asks a question, you know, we feel obligated to answer that question. You know, in a penitentiary environment, it's a little different because you don't want to elaborate. You don't want the convicts to know too much about you. You know, most of them already see you drive up in the parking lot, so they know what kind of car you drive. You know, and they're sizing you up already, you know, and sad as it is, you know, to this day, you know, start from day one when I was in the penitentiary, I never wore a wedding ring because I didn't want them to know whether I was married or not. That was one less question that they had to ask me. You know, as far as what we used to teach them, you know, when I taught the academies, you know, you can kind of look around and see who's confident about themselves, who's not confident about themselves. And the one thing I used to tell them is, you know, if you cannot say the word no, either get you an index card or break out your pen or a marker, write the word no on your palm. And when a convict asks you a question, you just hold your palm up and you continue on about your duties. You know, as far as answering questions, you know, we're human. We're instinctive to give that answer. You know, anybody who's been a parent, you know, and your kids ask, well, why? You know, after the 4th or 5th time, well, damn it, because I said so. But it takes you 4 or 5 times to get to that point. You know, in the penitentiary, you've got to be at that point right off the bat. And that's why I used to tell my officers, you know, if you cannot say the word no, write it on your palm and just hold it up.
I like that, man. I like that. I really do like that. And then we have a couple of people saying, can we come to the yard and speak? I said, sure, we do that all the time. We do speak public engagements. And also Unibug says, you can apply this to all parts of life. Let me just tell you something, Yina, and this goes with Alicia too. Michelle as well, actually. You're 100% correct. That's where the magic is, guys. I mean, we based our experiences, but if you could find application elsewhere, that's where the magic is. That's your intentional effort to do that, because there is value here. When I first put the book Inmate Manipulation Decoded on market and went on Amazon, Amazon put it as a parenting magazine, and I had to pull it off because I was getting complaints on my Amazon when they give you statements, when they give you comments. They were like, how are you putting a parenting book and calling the your kids inmates? I was like, it's because it's an inmate book. It's not a parent book. Read the book, but I had to get it off because the comments were becoming negative. They thought I wrote a book about parenting, and how I define my parenting is calling my kids inmates. So they pulled it off. So now the next part, guys, this is one of my favorite parts to discuss because this took me the most to learn, but this is something that we need to be aware of, guys. So it's going to be spelled out as best I could, but consistency can be used against us, and we all have a want to be consistent, with who we are, with what we do, because it brings us a level of security and also trust in ourselves. So I want to show you how consistency can be played against you. Now, guys, this is probably the most complex out of all the videos that we're going to see today, but definitely a very important topic that must be touched on in order for us to understand the game of consistency at this level. And do you get a certificate so I can show my grandkids that I cannot be manipulated? Yeah, Joe's going to start sending them out. Joe, when we're done, you can start sending them out. All right, hold on.
I'll send them out on index cards. There we go.
I wanted you to do that so badly. I didn't know how to introduce it. You just kind of read my mind. Yes, because I'm weak. I can't say no to Julie. I'm weak. My justification would have been something external, But then Joe comes in, bam, with the no. Oh, man. Consistency in terms of okay, so Anthony, so we're going to touch on that right now. Joe, she said send me one. She wants one for the grandkids.
Talk to the grandkids. No matter what walk of life, kids, grandkids, penitentiary, it's always easier to go from a no to a yes than it is from a yes to a no. So just remember that. That's
Corrections 101. All right, guys, so let's do this next one. This is one of my favorite ones out of them all. I like this one. All right, let's see.
How you guys doing? Thanks, Anthony Gangi. Welcome to video 4 of my Inmate Manipulation course. This is going to be titled Down in the Duck. If you guys are entering the field of corrections, or if you guys are already in the field of corrections, you got to make sure you've read Down in the Duck. It comes from the book from Diane Boston and Bud Allen called Games Criminals Play. This is a very needed read. You can even download just that story in itself, but you guys must read that book. It deals with what I call minimal compliance, and I'll get to that. But it also relates to that first law I mentioned in the intro about consistency and commitment. This is where, in my mind, where you can actually see an invisible process happening and the officer traveling down that path to the point where there's no return, but also the point where they begin to question, like, what have I done? What am I doing? This game here, Down in the Duck, is related to leverage that's created by the inmate. So when the officer has any doubt, or the staff member has any doubt in regards to granting a request from the inmate, they will go ahead and utilize that leverage to enforce the officer's decision or the staff member's decision to confirm what the inmate needs. Now, guys, real quick, Down in the Duck, it's kind of like Inmate Manipulation 101. It's when an inmate asks for you for something very small, not that big of a deal, and then eventually, once you grant that, it opens up the door for other minimal requests, but each request is a little bit greater than the request before, until finally the inmate asks for something extreme, like the uniform in this story, and then the officer has no choice but to give it to them, because if they don't, the inmate will then go ahead and say, well, this is what you've given me so far, and I'm going to wind up turning you in. So if you've read the book, you're familiar with that. But what we may not understand is what's going on in that staff member's mind, why this is happening. Like, how did this staff member get taken down this path? And this is a very complicated chapter. So I'm glad I have the dry erase board, because this dry erase board will actually help me explain it a lot better. But I want to look at things in steps. So let's just say we have 6 steps here. Six will be the final request, and 1 is the initial request. Now remember, guys, we're talking about the laws of influence, so we're talking about consistency and commitment. In order for an inmate to get me to finally grant him or her that final request, there has to be a consistency in my behavior for me to get to that point. And it really does start with that small request. And I believe in the story it may be a stick of gum or a pen. Either way, it's something small, something ambiguous, something that, the staff member may not think it's that big of a deal, but what it does is it opens up the window for the inmate to see, okay, I can get this staff member. So when the inmate comes up to the individual in the story, now I forget the exact requests, what they were, but just granted, it's a very small request, very minimal. When the inmate asks for that minimal request and the officer grants it, it opens up that window for that consistent behavior that's needed to take us all the way to step 6. So you have to remember here, guys, there's a plan in motion here. It's not so much the first step, it's the destination, it's the 6th step. So the first step is what opens up this window for us to make it over there. That's a road we do not want to be on. Now, mind you, I just want to make sure you're aware of this. If the inmate was to come up and ask this officer for the uniform right from the get-go, that's such an extreme request. The officer would be like, whoa, I'm not doing that. And also, the inmate hasn't created any leverage, so there's really not much the inmate can do to get that request granted. The inmate would be a fool just to come up and say, hey, give me a uniform. No, so the inmate's planned this out. The inmate wants to collect leverage, wants to build some consistent nature with this officer in order to create the leverage. And then finally, when they go ahead and make that final request for the uniform, even if the officer's taken back by it, well, I got enough leverage, so I'm going to force you into saying yes anyway. Now, mind you, guys, when the first initial request is offered, this inmate's a nice person. This inmate's playing that card. This inmate is trying to be someone that this officer can trust, someone that this officer can rely on. We're going to cover some of those laws later on, but we're talking about a feeling of obligation as well. What I'm going to do for this officer so they feel the need to do for me, and it kind of builds this false trust between the officer and that inmate. You don't really find out who this inmate really is until you deny that last request. Then all of a sudden, there's no turning back, and the inmate knows that. The inmate's going to know that, okay, once I give him this request, there's no turning back. So, no, I know you're saying you're not going to give me the uniform, but you are going to give me the uniform, because if you don't, I'm turning you in. Because I've collected all this leverage. Again, whatever I collected on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, what we're going to go through real quick is I'm going to show you how these steps work, but it's more of us justifying the behavior, being committed to what we're doing, and also consistent. Because the inmate, when they start asking for things, these are all minimal steps, guys. These aren't big steps, but they're very consistent with the path that they're taking us on. Because trust and believe, the moment that they break away from that consistency, we're going to wake up and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you asking for? So the inmate has this all planned, and the route is consistent. It's where we're headed, and they're looking for our commitment to it. That's the key. They're looking for our commitment the whole time they're collecting leverage. So again, let's just say the first request is a pen. The inmate comes up, very trustworthy. Maybe you don't think nothing of it, and you give the inmate the pen. The next request will be something slightly above that request. Hypothetically, let's say a candy bar. The key here is that these are very small requests. They're nothing that's going to wake you up. You're not going to go from a pen to a uniform, like I said, or a pen to drugs. That doesn't work that way. They're looking for consistency, but it's very slow moving. It's subtle. So again, you say yes to this request because there's really not that much of a difference between these two requests. So they ask for the third one, and you wind up saying yes again because there's really not that much of a difference between these two requests. You see what's happening, guys? The requests are going slightly a level up from the prior request. But the thing is, we're going further and further away from the first request. But we're only comparing it to the request before. So now we go up another notch. Now we're already on step 4. But because the request from step 3 wasn't that bad, well, step 4 is really not that bad because it's only a step above 3, very small step. So we go ahead and say yes to that. And then we go another level. We are all the way up here. But again, it's a small request as compared to the request prior. So now, what we have here is what I call minimal compliance. We're kind of slowly moving up these steps. And the problem is when we go to look back to justify our behavior, we don't look all the way back at step 1 to see if what I'm doing is wrong. We just go back to the prior step. Prior step's not that big. So I'll grant you step 2 because step 1 wasn't that bad. I'll grant you step 3 because step 2 wasn't that bad. I'll grant you step 4 because step 3 wasn't that bad. I'll grant you step 5 because step 4 wasn't that bad. But what they're failing to realize here is that if you look from step 5, look how far you have traveled. Look how far that request has escalated. That's a lot from that first step. But again, we go to justify our behaviors. It's very hard for us to now look back all the way down to 1. It's easier for us to look back here at the request prior. Now the concern is this. As this officer or the staff member is being taken down this path, if we don't catch it in time, they've learned to justify their behavior. That's a problem for us. It's what they call cognitive dissonance. It's where your behavior is in conflict with your beliefs. So what you tend to do is try to mold your behavior and your beliefs as one. So basically, I'm going to change my belief to match my behavior. So even if there was slight conflict between each one of these steps, this staff member's learned to justify that. So now if I approach this officer or this staff member when they're already at step 5, they've already justified where they're at. They've already confirmed that they haven't done anything wrong because look how far they traveled. If I tell them they're wrong at step 5, what are they going to say? Well, if I'm wrong at step 5, then well, I could have been wrong at step 4. I could have been wrong at step 3. I could have been wrong at step 2. Hell, I should have never gave them the pen. They're not going to do that because they've already traveled so far down. That's why for this, it's very important that we catch them right here at step 1. But that's very hard to do because the process isn't so overtly seen. So the reason why it's good to do this course is because we have to recognize it in ourselves and we have to put the kibosh to that. We have to stop that. And the sad thing, guys, is if I go to approach that officer and they're already high up here and they've already justified that belief and what they're doing is not wrong, me approaching them later on and trying to tell them, hey, what you're doing is wrong, that may only reinforce their relationship with that inmate to prove that they're not wrong. Because again, they don't think they're wrong. So if I come up and say, hey, you're wrong, and that means that they have to now go back and look at all that, they're not going to want to do that. So they're going to look to confirm the fact that they're not wrong, which may open them up to a better relationship with that inmate. It literally may reinforce that relationship between them and that inmate. That's why it's so important, again, to catch it here. There's so much going on in someone's head when it gets to that point. When it gets to that point, it is very hard to bring that person back. Now, you get the last level, where finally there comes that extreme request. I want the uniform. And that's when the officer's thinking like, man, how did it get to that point? So the officer is going to maybe even think it's a joke. Staff member thinks it's a joke. Say, hey, I'm not going to give you a uniform. I'm joking, right? And all of a sudden, this nice inmate changes. Well, I'm not joking. I have got everything you've given me at every step along the way. You don't give me that uniform, I'm turning you in. And the story, what happens is, because this officer kind of goes into covering their own selves, their own ass, they wind up giving the inmate the uniform. Here's the funny thing with that, though. Something I can comment on. When the inmate asks you for that uniform, that's a wake-up call for anybody. That's a wake-up call for anybody. That's automatically going to let you know, oh my God, I'm on this path.
Excuse me, could you lower your voice?
Yes, sorry. So, sorry guys, I'm in the library. So at that point, once that inmate lets you know that, hey, I want that uniform, now it's been confirmed that, okay, I've been traveling down this wrong path. And this is what makes that wrong path evident, because now he's asking me for something that I cannot give. So now in an effort to cover their own ass, what do? They give the inmate the uniform because they're more concerned about protecting themselves. When the right thing is, hey, you know what? I messed up. I made a bad choice. Let me not make this affect everybody else. You know what? I'm going to turn myself in. That automatically neutralizes the leverage that the inmate has on the officer, and that will at some level at least give you that part of control back. Because this whole time you've never had control. You lost control this whole journey. So again, this is how downing the duck works. This deals with consistency and commitment, really pushing us along the way and us not really going back looking to see how far we've traveled. Again, it's very slow and subtle. This is really a true definition of the dangers of the process. So I hope I covered it well. I hope you guys understand this. Next topic we're going to do in video 5 is going to be authority. Authority is very important. We're also going to touch on shopping for staff and how that works and why those with a higher level of authority may have a bigger target on their back. All right, guys, thank you for watching video 4. Next video, video 5.
All right, hold on. And we are back. Hold on, let me just get rid of that. All right, so that's a unique one. I got shut up there from a lady in there. She said I was talking a little loud. And maybe I was. But again, I had to get this video out there. The information was important. And it is what it is. I still, it kind of throws you off though, because you got a momentum going. And she didn't know what the hell I was doing, and then she talks right in the middle of, me giving out this lecture, and she's like, do you mind turning it down, please? Or shutting down? And it's like, so guys, so the big takeaway from this part, Alicia's right. I'm Italian. Yeah, 100%. The big takeaway from this part is that consistency and commitment. Again, if you get caught up into this track, and then there's that chance where that extreme request is provided your way, well, now that you're caught up, and now you're going to have to make a choice. Do you cover your own ass, or do you go ahead and do the right thing? And I want to mention something, guys. When an officer or something, or a good staff member, let's say, winds up getting caught up and doing something foolish, the person that gets handcuffed that day is no longer an officer, is no longer an ideal staff member. So when someone says, yeah, a correctional officer was arrested today, that wasn't who was arrested. That person is no longer a definition of what we stand by, what we stand for. That person that was arrested is the outcome of a foolish game played by him and the inmate. So, Joe, real quick, before we get to the next video, and yeah, I do talk, my hands are loud. I think they're making some jokes. I got told to shut up a little bit in that video. But Joe, when it comes to consistency and commitment, I think that this really does outline the process. You're very familiar with downing the duck. Is that something they still teach in Texas?
Yeah, it amongst several books, games inmate play, Down in the Duck. There's quite a few books that we reference, during the academy.
Yeah, because the Down the Duck, the main story behind that, guys, is the inmates able to ask for small things because the officer themselves is very gullible. You actually could put Down in the Duck and it will pop up. You should read it because there's a lot more in play than just the leverage. There's a reason why that officer was targeted. Our officer is very gullible, and the inmate that writes this story, Down the Duck, is actually written from an inmate's perspective. So the inmate's telling you exactly what they did, and it's very, very, very detailed. I mean, it goes beyond that, but this was just the main premise of that consistency and commitment. And just out of curiosity, Joe, and again, the book is an older book. It's called Games Criminals Play. But have you ever seen an inmate try to employ this level of game? Because this is a game that takes time, takes effort. So I know that when they decide to employ it, they do want a target that they're going to be most successful with because of the amount of energy that goes into this game.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the minute you bring a class of new cadets in, the minute they're walking through the gate, the inmates are already sizing them up. They've already picked out their future victim based on the way they carry themselves. When they walk down the hallway, different penitentiaries are different setups and different styles, but the ones that I started on were what they considered older red bricks that were built in the 1900s, pretty, old penitentiaries. And when you walked in, you had inmates walking up and down both sides of the hallways, to and from chow, to and from school, whatever. And, here you are in the center of the hallway with a class of cadets, and they're sizing them up. They're looking for the ones that personalize or project vulnerability or weakness. And, the game starts right then and there. Right then and there, it starts. And, it may be a snide comment as the inmates walk by based on, and I'm just going to use a female as a reference, based on the way they're dressed. Are their clothes too tight and revealing? And males too. But the game starts right then and there. So anybody who's worked in the penitentiary and stayed at the same facility for any length of time, who your aggressors are, who your suspects are, who your manipulators are. So the minute the game starts, that's when the stop should be put to it right then and there. And we try to teach that in the academies. If we take you for a unit tour and a convict says something to you out of the way, you don't need my permission. You deal with it right then and there, and get it out there on the table and get it over with, so they know, okay, she's not the one, he's not the one.
And that's the message. Again, that's clearly on your hand. And don't erase that. I'm going to expect to see that next week when you're on again.
He'll be there.
Yeah, hey guys, and also I want to mention before we go to the next video, it is very important, like Joe said, to catch it before it really gets that involved, because again, that officer, that staff member that's being turned has learned to justify those behaviors the further down they go. So sometimes when you go to confront them, they may be like, yo, I disagree with you. I think you're wrong. And the sad thing is that may go ahead and reinforce them wanting to prove that they're right by staying with that type of behavior. And it's very rare for somebody to go back and look at all the steps they've been through. I mean, it makes sense when they want to look at 5 to 4 or 4 to 3, but they're never going to go back from 5 to 1 because there's a huge conflict when you look back at 5 to 1, but maybe not so much between 5 and 4. And then again, the officer doesn't really get that wake-up call until the inmate asks for that extreme request, and now it comes to light. Now they start to see who this inmate really is. And you're going to see that if you read the little thing, Down in the Duck, you're going to see how this inmate shifts from the nicest inmate to when this request is going to come, when that leverage is exposed. And that officer is taken back like, yo, are you playing with me or is this who you are? And it's who that person was. So again, it literally is. You don't really know who you're dealing with until that last request comes about. That's why you never wanted to get that far. All right, so This next one's good. It's about the position of authority and how inmates can kind of have a perception of authority over us. Now, guys, again, I'm sure this could apply in outside the prison setting as well. But I think this is going to be something that, as a supervisor, Joe's going to have definitely some insight on this. Because again, guys, this actually does lean a lot on the supervisor. And again, it's called authority. That's this part. So let me share that one out now. I think we're on video. Let's see. We are on video 4. No, wait.
Nope. Video 5.
Video 5. You're right. Good job, Joe. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to video number 5. We're going to be discussing 2 laws of influence right now, social validation and authority. But before we go into these laws of influence, I want to briefly talk about something called shopping for staff. So what exactly does that mean? Inmates are going to do whatever they can to get an answer that's favorable to them, that brings them closer to the goal of whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. And the thing here is that if we are inconsistent with each other, so if me and my partner are inconsistent, or if I'm inconsistent with my relief officer from a different shift, if there is some inconsistency, if I'm inconsistent with my supervisors, if there's no communication, inmates are going to see that as a weakness, and they're going to be able to play their game. And when I talk about consistency, consistency only comes when we have that level of communication with each other, where inmates know for a fact that if a no comes from Gangi, the no is also going to come from this person, that person, the supervisor, whatnot. That level of communication brings about the consistency that we need, that automatically stops the inmate from being able to shop for staff. I mean, in short, it's like if you have children and daddy says no, and then the child goes to mommy and mommy says yes, or vice versa. Basically, the child is looking to get a yes, an answer that's favorable. And if mommy and daddy aren't communicating, there's a good chance that yes can occur. Well, same thing here. So just for example, if I'm starting my shift and I have a partner that I'm working with, it's very good that me and my partner get on the same page as to what's expected from each other for that shift, because we need to be consistent. Consistency, again, will make sure that the inmates know what to expect, and they see that we're communicating, they see that we're on the same page. They're less likely able to isolate and divide us. So just to kind of draw a little picture out, if you have an inmate here, and they have a concern, and they're looking to solve a concern, they may approach me first. They come up to me, they ask me whatever that request is. I go ahead and tell them, let's say no. Well, this inmate may not like that no. So this inmate may try to maneuver an angle with my partner. Now, if me and my partner are not communicating at all, if me and my partner don't know what to expect from each other, me and my partner just are inconsistent with how we run things, there's a good chance that when he goes to my partner, that my partner will provide this inmate with the yes. If that's happening, that's because there's definitely no communication between us, and we are inconsistent. And again, that's because we don't have any communication. We don't know what to expect from each other, and the inmate knows that. So now what the inmate was able to do was maneuver. They were maneuvering because we don't communicate, they know that, and we're also inconsistent. Now, with that said, let's change the scenario around a little bit. So now let's say inmate again has a concern. And here I am, and they come to me first, and I go ahead and say no. Answer hasn't changed. So they go to shop for staff. So they go to my partner. But in this case here,
me and my partner, we communicate back and forth. We know what to expect from each other. So again, we have good communication. We know what to expect from each other, and we're consistent with each other. If we're consistent, that means we're running a unit consistently. We're dealing with the inmate population consistency. The inmates pretty much know what to expect, but the key is we know what to expect from each other. That inmate's going to know, well, if I got to know from Gangi, and you're looking at all this communication, the fact that they're working together, all this stuff, that no is also going to come from my partner as well. Because we communicate. And even if my partner doesn't know what my response was, he's not going to go to the inmate, he's going to go to me. Because we have good communication. Hey, such and such inmate asked me about this, and I don't know if you said yes or no to it, but what's your thoughts? Oh, I told him no. Okay, not a problem. And he goes back to the inmate. It's a no. So what discourages inmates shopping for staff is consistency and communication. And guys, that goes on all levels too, even if you're a supervisor. If you're a supervisor and your officer's doing what they're supposed to do, don't be inconsistent with that officer. Support that officer. If the inmate goes to the officer and the officer says no, and the no is a valid no, but then the inmate decides I'm going to go around that officer's back and then go to you as a supervisor, and you say yes, you just played him. You just played your officer out. And you also encourage the inmate to continue shopping for staff. And guess who they're going to go to every time that officer says no? They're going to go to you because you're being seen as weak now, because you're not supporting your staff, and also there's a little bit of inconsistency there. So again, if you want to discourage shopping for staff, you need to be consistent, and that consistency comes from communication. That right there will stop any inmate from shopping for staff. As long as we are communicating, as long as we're consistent with each other, consistent between shifts, it's not that an inmate knows just what to expect from me. They also know what to expect from everybody else because we're working on the same page. And this ain't that easy to accomplish, but it starts when we communicate, though. If we start communicating, we can strive to be as consistent as possible. But if you're not communicating, then you're not going to be consistent, and that will encourage inmates to go ahead and shop. I got to know, I'll find someone to get a yes. Okay, so that's the first part. I wanted to get that out there. Just some side thoughts. But now I want to focus on two laws, and they kind of run into each other. One is social validation, and the other is authority. So basically, how can an inmate gain a level of authority? This is all about perception, guys, when it comes to the authority. It's basically given the perception that they have authority. Hey, guys, it takes hard work and effort to move up. You gotta, in some cases, you gotta study. You got to put your work in. It's not something you just want to give away to just anybody who never put the work in, never put the effort in. It's something that you should protect. And when you start getting into those higher positions of authority, so again, from the experience that I have, the rank structure, let's say, would be officer, sergeant, lieutenant, major, administration, whatever your departmental rank would be. The target on your back for manipulative inmate to come at you increases because your span of control increases. If I was an inmate and I had the choice to choose between manipulating an officer or their supervisor, I'm going to go after the supervisor. The reason why is because the supervisor has a larger area
of control, but also has people that are under them. Which means that if I can manipulate that supervisor, I can manipulate this whole area of control. That's why if you're a supervisor and you're watching this, you have to protect your position of authority. Because if you don't protect that position of authority and you're vulnerable, so are the people underneath you. So in order to protect them, you have to protect yourself. You can't have this open dialogue with the inmates in a manner that really circumvents the level of authority from your front line. Now, manipulation is about control, and you got to realize something. Inmates are looking for control at any moment, at any time. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we don't give that up. And as mentioned, having that position of authority is something that you don't want to give up. But we're talking about perception here. So how can an inmate be perceived as having authority over a staff member? And it's actually a very subtle game that's played here. And the game is meant to disenfranchise staff from doing their job. So just an example. Let's say I'm a supervisor and I have an inmate porter or trustee who cleans my area. And they do a great job. Hopefully it doesn't get to the point where I feel obligated to this inmate as a supervisor because now they're cleaning my area, and maybe it gets to that point where I want my area to look that good. So there's like this need or sense of obligation between me and that inmate. But with that said, let's say there's a closeness that develops between me as a supervisor and that inmate. And the inmate wants this closeness to happen, and he also wants frontline to see that closeness. That means that as this supervisor is up here monitoring this inmate wants to have that perception that they are close, that this is a close relationship. And they want the staff to see that. They want staff to see that. This is a perception right here that inmates want because it shows that there's a closeness here. And if ever there's an act of desperation where this inmate gets in trouble, I will guarantee you this perception will then get played to the front line in an effort for the inmate to alleviate that charge. So with that said, let's say this inmate gets in trouble. So now, here's the officer. Here's the inmate. The inmate gets in trouble. The officer goes to write up the inmate, and the inmate turns around and says, well, if you write me up, don't forget I work for sergeant or supervisor such and such. The reason why that inmate is saying that is because he knows that he's got this perceived closeness with that supervisor, and he's making an effort to see, hey, if I tell him this, will this make him second guess or her second guess them writing me up? Because I just threw out the fact that I know your supervisor. And you got to realize something. This perception that they were playing of closeness between them and the supervisor, that makes this officer fill in the blanks. Basically wondering how close they really are. And the fact that you threw out that supervisor's name, you're trying to say that, well, because I know that supervisor now will have a control over me and saying, okay, well, don't write him up because he cleans my office, because he goes above and beyond, or she goes above and beyond. It's a game that is very well played, but the right approach to this is when the inmate plays that route, what you're going to do is you're still going to write up the inmate. You do not let that disenfranchise you. And then you're going to call the supervisor. You're going to tell that supervisor, hey, this inmate did something foolish, and they're throwing out your name as if you're going to help them get out of this charge. And the right action from that supervisor should be something very simple, guys. Go back to this inmate, fired. Done. You're getting written up, probably even more charges, but the point is you no longer work for me. Now that's a good supervisor, because what that supervisor just did was this inmate tried to take power from that officer. You understand that? When the inmate said, hey, I work for such and such, he's trying to take power from this officer, trying to stop that officer from doing their job. So this officer needs to get that power back. And how does he get it back? He tells the supervisor, and the supervisor fires the inmate. That gives the power back to the officer. And that also shows that we got communication and consistency. Now, if you're a supervisor, the bad move is to do this. If you have an officer here getting ready to write up this inmate, and this inmate plays that game saying, well, all right, you know what, then I clean for such and such. Okay, well, I'm going to go talk to the supervisor and tell him what you just said. And then the supervisor comes back and says, you know what, don't write him up. He's a good porter, or she's a good porter. They clean my office. They do all this. I need him, which is something you never want to say, but I need him. Now look what just happened. First off, you're weak. Second off, you never gave the officer their power of authority back. It's actually still here with this inmate. This inmate here still has the power of authority. And second thing is, you just disenfranchised this officer. This officer now, instead of being supported, they're like, you know what? Fine. If you're not going to write this inmate up, then what's the sense of me even doing my job? What's the sense of even doing what's expected of me? And you know what this officer is going to do now? This officer is going to vent. And they're going to go to other officers. And they're going to tell the other officers, hey, look what happened today. Wanted to write up this inmate dropped the supervisor's name. The supervisor called me up and told me to drop the charge. So guess what they're going to stop doing? They're going to stop writing up inmates. They're going to get disenfranchised. It's a lot of hard work to write up an inmate. It is. Only to know that you're going to go through all this hard work, only for this person here to throw it away. So again, now we have no communication and inconsistency. So just in short, this inmate's trying to get a level of authority over by this staff member by throwing that supervisor's name out. The right answer would be that supervisor gets notified by this officer here. The supervisor supports the charge from this officer. It eliminates the power that this inmate now has. It gives the authority back to this individual, and it highlights communication and consistency. The other way around, where you tell the supervisor decides not to write the inmate up, it gives the power authority back to this inmate. This officer becomes disenfranchised. This officer then vents to the other officers. Next thing you know, you just have pretty much a staff that just don't want to do their job. Because again, they're going to do all this hard work only for the charges to be thrown out. They don't feel supported. No support, staff's not going to do their job. I want to cover one last thing, and it's similar to this, and it's just called social validation. It kind of crosses into consistency and communication. Now, if we were consistent and I'm communicating constantly with my partners and with my peers, then it's hard for me to be played by an inmate that's shopping for staff and trying to play their games, because I can tell if an inmate's going to be lying or not, because I know my partners. I know the people I'm working with. I know what to expect from them. They know what to expect from me. But sometimes inmates, what they'll do is they'll play games where, let's say I'm covering a unit for a day, not the regular officer. And an inmate comes up to me with a concern. Whatever the concern is, I tell the inmate, It's a no. This inmate, what they're going to try to do is they're going to say, well, officer such and such allows us. Officer such and such is the 5-day. They allow us to do this all the time. They're doing that to see if I will go ahead and change my answer to a yes. And they're using somebody that I may have respect for, somebody I can relate to. They're not saying, well, such and such inmate says it. No, they're saying officer such and such allows it. They're hoping that by using someone I relate to, by someone I connect with, that will make me change my answer to a yes. And believe it or not, guys, sad to say, sometimes that works. Instead of the officer going back and trying to validate if this officer allows it or not, or just trying to get that communication going, when the inmate says, hey, well, such and such allows it, the officer may say, all right, then go ahead, do it. Without even validating, without trying to see if what the inmate's information is correct or not. So the right thing that you should be doing to not encourage this is when the inmate drops whoever's name, you still say no until you can figure it out. But with that said, you now go back and connect with that officer or connect with that person whose name's been dropped and let them know, hey, no different than we just discussed before. Hey, such and such inmate dropped your name about this request, and they're saying you grant it. I just want you to know that they're using your name. So now, hopefully, this officer opens up their eyes, goes back to the inmate, and deals with that. The cool thing here is that shows that these two people are communicating. He's hoping that, this inmate here is hoping that they can say that because they don't think that this officer is going to talk to this officer. No, communicate. Bring that communication in and bring it back. This way, when that inmate goes to try that game again, they're going to know, well, that's not going to work. Because I know for a fact that if I say it, he's going to talk to that officer, and that officer is going to go ahead and confront me. So either way, it's that communication. But that's what you call social validation or consensus. Basically, I'm going to, say, hey, can I get this request done? This officer says no. Well, such and such allows it, and I hope that I will favor that because I have a good rapport with such and such. Me and such get along. We're, we're good partners when running a unit. But in the end result is I'm going to go back to such and such, tell such and such what happened, and then officer such and such is going to be like, well, I never let them do that. Now we have the communication here, and that's going to bring the officer back to him, and we're going to nip that game right in the butt. And again, that's dealing with communication and consistency. So we covered a lot: authority, social validation, shopping for staff, but the end result of it all is communication and consistency. Now, stay tuned for video 6. We're going to be discussing liking, how inmates try to pull us out of our prescribed role by connecting with us on a personal level. Thanks for watching.
All right. So the liking is what's going to kind of cross into the manipulation of, let's say, a female or a male, pulling them out prescribed role, like a relationship like the Vicky White, Casey White type scenario. And that's actually another very important maneuver inmates will do is pulling you out of your prescribed role. So think about this, guys. I want you to know that, guys, these don't work in isolation. They work in collaboration. So think about, isolation, divide and conquer, pulling you out of your prescribed role. I mean, think about all these things that are not just happening in pieces, but are happening all together at once. I mean, you could look at something and say, holy crap, I just watched Gangi's video, or I just read Gangi's book, and I just saw a staff member get hit up with 6 things at once, because this is just letting you know what exists. But I'll guarantee you, none of these things are happening one at a time. They're happening all at once. Hey, Joe, I'm sure in your career, someone has dropped your name to get I'm sure an inmate has dropped your name to get something favorable, correct? I mean, you were a supervisor. I'm sure they do that a lot.
Yeah, they do that. They do that quite often. As a supervisor, you have got to ensure not only that you are firm, fair, and consistent, that anybody that works, if you have supervisors that work under you like I did, are firm, fair, and consistent, and you got to stress the fact that to the officers that they're firm, fair, and consistent. But, the one of the big things is, you got to back your staff. Right or wrong, always back your staff. If they did something, if your staff did something wrong, you know, you always back them in front of the offenders, and you know, talk to them about it in private later on. But, you know, Alicia had put in, you know, I made the comment about the Jolly Rancher supervisors. I don't know if they sell Jolly Ranchers all over the place or if it's just a Texas thing. I don't know. Anyways, for those that don't know what a Jolly Rancher is, just a hard candy, different flavors. I used to have sergeants that I had, you know, 5 to 7 sergeants that worked under me. At the most, I had 13. And I would pull them in as a lieutenant. And when I find out that, you know, they went down there and didn't back the officer and basically took their authority from them, we had some pretty unpleasant conversations in the office. And I would throw a bag of Jolly Ranchers on the counter or on the desk and tell them, hell, you might as well go hand them out to the offenders. And they'd look at me crazy like, well, I'm not handing those out. Why would I hand those out? I said, well, if you went down there and took that boss's authority from them and didn't back their play, you've already demoralized them and showed yourself as weak. Hell, you might as well go down there and just start handing out candy to the offenders. And, you know, from that point on, light bulbs started clicking, and they're like, oh, shit, you know, Pomponio's not playing. You know, I would, when officers would write cases, I would make them bring it to my office. I would make my sergeants log it in. This way I can track the cases, you know, because my sergeants knew there was one thing that I didn't waver on. Back your boss. Right or wrong, back your boss. Always back the boss unless it's something just so, you know, out of bounds of policy. You know, I would tell the bosses, look, this is your area. Keep it within policy. Keep it between the ditches. You run it as you see fit. This is your area, your assignment. You run it. And my sergeants knew that they better back my boss's play or there was going to be hell to pay behind it. You know, that was one thing I did not waver on. And you know, you got to be firm, fair, consistent. You've got to back each other's play, and everybody has to be on the same page of music. If not, all it takes is one person to break that whole team down.
Yeah, you know, I like what Flora Smith said about a weak supervisor can break morale. You know, guys, real quick, inmates are going to try to circumvent staff in their efforts to shop or circumvent the rules in their efforts to get something favorable. You know, what they call shopping for staff. And especially when it's a supervisor, if the officer or the boss man on the unit, you know, gives a valid no, the inmate, if they go to the supervisor to question the no, the perception of the officer's authority is now up in the air. It's in limbo. Which way is it going to go? The supervisor's actions now are going to make that determination if we are going to go ahead and give that authority back to the officer, or are we going to be weak? Because I said the no is a valid no, and I'm just going to let the inmate get away with it and therefore give the inmate the authority. And that's why I don't know if supervisors may realize this, but when you're coming into the unit and all the inmates are going to you, this isn't a popularity contest. You don't want that. You know, you got to do whatever you can to regulate that right at the very beginning. They need to know where they need to, you know, who they need to go to on that unit. Don't get me wrong. You can be visible, but not so easily accessible. And at any time you can give back that power of authority back to the officer, you do that. That is your job, because the officer's the one that's got to run the unit. You don't want to disenfranchise them, because in the end of the day, and this is what happens, is that you wind up taking the power away from them. They wind up not wanting to do their job, you know? And to me, that's the most demoralizing thing, where if I have a valid no and then the inmate goes to you, circumvents the no. And real quick on the social validation, that happens a lot too. And this is where officers and people have to do their research. If I tell you no, and you come back and say, well, when I worked with Pomponio, and you know, he would always tell me yes, I have to go to Pomponio now. Pomponio, I have to go to him. I have to, one, let him know this inmate's dropping his name for favor. And I'm curious to see, maybe Joe's being played. We don't know. But to sit there and think that I'm going to take that blindly and say, well, if Joe said it, let me go ahead and do it, then you're a fool. The moment the inmate says it, the no still stands. Let me go talk to Joe, because I find it kind of weird that Joe would say yes to this. You know, that's not like Joe. You know, so let me go find out. And let me tell you something. If Joe didn't say it, Not only does that inmate hear it back from me, but guess who else is going to talk to that inmate? Joe. Do you know why? Because that shows that me and Joe communicate. That's one thing. But that also shows that Joe has more value for me as his peer than he does for the inmate. And he's going to go back there and he's going to let that inmate know what happens when you drop my name in some effort just to manipulate some bullshit. Hey, we got Russ that came back. So, Russ, after we do the next video, I'll pull you in because we're going to wrap up this part. We're on video 6. But, Joe, anything in that, or we're good for 6? Good for the next video?
Oh yeah, all right, we're good for 6. You pretty much hit on everything.
And Joe, this is the.
It was quite comical when I retired. The inmates in the craft shop. I don't know if you can see this.
Oh yeah.
Had that made for me in the craft shop because they knew
I see guilty people.
I didn't play.
Like, yeah, that's a good one. Russ is eating ice cream right now. Look at him. He didn't know I put him on camera. Russ, we're glad to have you back, man. Hey,
I'm glad to get back. I just, I had an equipment failure and so forth like that. And, I'm also
run, had to go get his ice cream. Yeah.
Well, I also had to deal with my dog and all that stuff like that.
All right, so we're on video 6. We are moving through. I just want to see something. Flora Smith mentions, I want to see the biggest problem aside from lack of staffing is the inconsistency between those who try to enforce, yes, and those who are too tired and worn out to care. They treat those of us who care about maintenance of order as creating more work for them. You know what? I want to explore that because that's true, Flora. So real quick, before we go into that next video, I don't want to leave that overlooked because Flora's spot on with that. We want our staff to do the right thing, right? The front line. We want them to be go-getters. We want them to, be aggressive in certain things because, again, we're working in a world where you can't passively allow things to happen. And the last thing you want is for officers that go above and beyond to be partnered with supervisors who are lazy and disenfranchised because they can put the kibosh on good hard-earned effort. Like Flora said, it's like, I could be a supervisor that doesn't want to work. And therefore, when you produce this stuff, it's like, well, what are you doing? I'm here on overtime. I don't have time for this. And it's like, well, of course you have time. It's your job. You have to step up. You have to get that done. So, Flora, you're spot on with that, 100%. If you're a go-getter and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, getting the job done, that supervisor needs to step up. There's no ifs and buts about it. And you're right, especially now with us being understaffed, we have to show our power in another way. And usually that comes from control. We may not have the numbers sad to say, but we still control this. And I think that matters. Now, the next video here is going to be about, we're almost done, guys. We're getting there. I can't believe we're doing it. It's great. Liking. Now, guys, this is actually what touches into relationships. So this you're going to find interesting. In my book, I actually have a part that deals with gender manipulation, basically how male inmates can manipulate female staff and how female inmates can manipulate male staff. But you're going to find this interesting. So I'm going to play this now. It's part 6.
How you guys doing? Welcome to video 6 of our inmate manipulation course. We're going to be talking about liking. That's one of the 6 laws of influence. Basically, it's harder to tell someone that you like the word no. Manipulative inmates know that. They want you to like them. They want to be friendly with you. They want to smile, be cordial, be extra nice. Because they know for a fact it's harder for you to tell no to someone that you like, that you admire. And one of the key ways that they do this, one of the ways that they try to foster this connection is by pulling the staff member out of their prescribed role. What does prescribed role mean? You know, what protects us as staff is that the work we do is governed by policy and procedure. Therefore, we know what to do because it's written. It protects us. Gives us the rules that we have to abide by. Inmates know that. And they know if they need to get you to bend a rule, they have to pull you out of that prescribed role, which means that I can't have you see me as an inmate, because if you see me as an inmate, then you automatically think of what your function is, what your role is. So we have to foster a connection. And what they do is they try to connect with you on something similar, something that can build a rapport between you and them. That similar connection is probably made up. So again, if I'm a father, maybe the inmate finds out I have some kids and they automatically make up this world with their father too. Or maybe they know I'm a sports fan. So what they do is they spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, looking into my teams, trying to find out what it is that I like, and then trying to build that connection based on sports. Something just as simple as sports. But again, it's an effort to build a bond, to build a connection on something similar. But the key is also, when you build that bond and you're taken out of your prescribed role, it's also an effort to bring about sympathy. Sympathy is deadly in corrections. You can be empathetic. Like, it's okay for me to understand where you're coming from, understand your perspective, but I'm not going to get involved in the emotions of that. And that's where sympathy comes into play. If you get involved in the emotions of that, you're blinded by the emotions and you wind up making decisions that are irrational, just don't make sense. So with that said, that false connection based on whatever similarity is again meant to make you pull you out of your prescribed role, but also to have you sympathize with that manipulative inmate. Now, I know some people will think, well, Gangi, sports, how big of a deal is that? Well, let's break this down. Let's say that I'm a big fan of the Giants. And let's say the inmates find out, and here I am, we're shooting on the breeze, we're shooting the breeze down the wing, and the inmate starts talking about the Giants, and I get engaged in a conversation with them. And, we're just talking about, some good stuff the Giants are doing and just, what my thoughts are. Maybe the inmate's just listening to the advice. And then I go home, Giants win, and now I can't wait to tell the inmate when I get back to work, first sign you're too involved. First sign you're too involved is if you think about an inmate at home in any capacity. This is your personal life. You shouldn't be thinking about inmates. But with that said, I come back to work, can't wait to tell the inmate, hey, did you see that game yesterday? Hey, man, Giants kicked ass and all this other stuff. This goes on for a while. Let's say one day the Giants lose. The inmate comes up to you and says, hey, you told me the Giants were going to win. So you told me they had the game in the bag. And it's like, well, it happens. Sad the Giants lost. The inmate goes, yeah, well, I made a bet. And I lost the bet. And now I owe a lot of inmates a lot of money, a lot of commissary. You will get some staff that will actually feel sorry for this inmate, because this inmate is trying to make this staff feel guilty as if they were responsible for this inmate making a bet. And you've had some staff do what? Help the inmate pay off that bet. They now sympathize with the inmate. They made a connection on that sport. The inmate was able to make that officer feel guilty. And now the officer winds up out of guilt, out of sympathy, paying off that bet. The officer was pulled out of that prescribed role, connected with the inmate on sports, and the inmate was able to draw sympathy. That officer, in turn, did it because they formed a bond in which it was hard for him to tell the inmate no. Scary, huh? Could happen if the inmate finds out you have children. Even if the inmate doesn't have any children. Remember, it's a false sincerity. Oh, hey, Gange, I know you have 2 kids. Hey, if you write me up, then I won't be able to see my kids. And you know how that is not to see your kids. Come on, man, give me a break. Help me. Look at the sympathy he's trying to draw. He's trying to draw that sympathy based on that personal connection between him and that officer and that staff member. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Having an inmate pull you out of your prescribed role, isolating you, that's one of the main causes why staff go down the wrong path, because they don't see that inmate as an inmate. They see them as something different, as a father, as an avid sports fan. Whatever it is, it's taken out of the context of the work environment and put into a whole nother environment that's personal. And again, if I see you as a sports fan, if I see you as a father, what am I not seeing myself as? I'm not seeing myself as the professional that has to watch over you, the professional that has rules that have to be followed within their prescribed role. It's a very, very dangerous game. When an inmate goes to pull you out of that prescribed role, try to make that connection with you, you have to nip that connection in the bud. Even again, if it's something as simple as what's your favorite sport team, don't worry about it. You know, my favorite sports team has nothing to do with our position here. You don't need to know what my favorite sports team is. You don't need to know if I have children. You don't need to know what type of car I drive. It may look like it's small talk, but it's not. It's information gathering. They're asking questions on something that you may think is superficial, but it's not. It's meant to keep on gathering information, knowledge, and then eventually use that against you. That's why I always tell people that there's a game made for everyone, because that game is made on personal information, on that false sincerity and how that inmate can connect with you on that personal level. You know, if you allow yourself to come in and engage in this small talk and open up your heart and let them know everything about you, you're going to be walking out of that facility in handcuffs, wondering what the hell just happened. So again, when we're talking about liking, we're talking about that false sincerity, that connection based on that personal level, the smiles, the niceness. It's all in an effort to make it harder for you to not give them what they want. That connection is a tool. It's a tool that's used to make you sympathize, to blind you with emotion, and even in some cases, to draw guilt. That's a great manipulative tactic, guilt. I make you feel guilty, and some people actually get that sense of guilt, and they wind up making a foolish choice because, again, they feel sympathetic. They get blinded by emotion. So never, ever let an inmate pull you out of your prescribed role. Always remember that you're dealing with an inmate. If you're mindful that you're dealing with an inmate, you'll be mindful of what your job is, what your function is, and you will stay within that prescribed role. That is key. Protect your personal information and you protect your career. I don't care how small that personal information is. It is leverage. It's a tool that can be used against you. It's a tool that is specifically used against you. That's what makes the game so complex. And again, last piece of advice that I mentioned before, just to stay with you, if you're thinking about an inmate on your personal time, I don't care in whatever capacity, you're too involved. Even if it's something about talking about a sports game the next day, you're too involved. All right, guys, stay tuned for video 7. Video 7 is going to cover the last 2 laws of influence. It's going to be scarcity and obligation. All right, guys, see you in video 7.
All right, so obligation is the Benjamin Franklin effect that Alicia's getting at, so we're definitely going to get to that. But real quick, I just want to mention this will kind of complement what this chapter is about. Real quick, what we just did, the lesson. Dangers of small talk. Me and Russ did a video on that. a couple of days ago. It's a great, phenomenal video about how small talk really should be strategic. And one thing is, you as staff should not be on the other end of constantly answering questions, because the more questions you answer, the more inmates get to find out about you. So literally small talk, I think for me, it's great. If you want to know more about the inmate, you can utilize that. But I don't think the inmate needs to know more about you to build that rapport. The inmate's into football, you can use that. You could say, if the inmate's going through crisis, I know you like football, don't you want to see the game Sunday? But, you know, the inmate doesn't need to know that you're a fan of football for you to be able to employ that. So we have the whole video on small talk and the strategic employment of small talk, because again, small talk could be very dangerous, because that's where we get a little bit very complacent with giving out our information. Before I read this thing, I just want to go to Russ and Joe real quick. What was your thoughts? I'll go with Russ first. What was your thoughts on inmates trying to now imagine this, Russ. I was telling them before you got on, these techniques don't happen in isolation. They happen in partnership. So you got pulling someone out of the prescribed role, isolation, divide and conquer. I mean, that pulling someone out of their prescribed role, trying to get us to connect on something personal, is probably one of the most dangerous methods an inmate can employ, especially if we fall for it. Correct?
Yeah. And when we come back to it, it seems like such a simple concept, about being pulled out of our prescribed role, about what it is, what is it that we're acting in the capacity of? Well, we should be acting in the capacity of a correctional officer, obviously. And yet somehow, some way, because of the way we interact with these people, because of the fact that, we're there often, exposed to them day after day after day, we start to, get this edge of complacency, because, we start to see them more as a human being, because we have perhaps, dozens or hundreds of these interactions. And over time, you start to, within your own mind, cloud your judgment and cloud just what your role is. So when you say those words, pull you out of your prescribed role, I think that that's a powerful way to view it, to be able to understand that you have a function, the inmate has a function, and, there are definite lines beyond which you must not cross.
And I want to read something before I get to you, Joe, real quick. So chapter 7 of my book talks about, does the gender of staff change the game? I'm going to read something to you, because this was not in the class when I did this. This was something that was developed later on. And when I do go to revisit my book a couple of years down the line, I'm probably going to add a whole chapter on small talk. The dialogue that me and Russ had on that, you guys really got to watch it. It's close to 1,000 views, but dangers of small talk. So it goes, does the game being employed change depending on the gender of the targeted staff member? And for the most part, yes. There's a shift in the process. Now, be mindful, nothing's 100%. Therefore, there will be many professionals that don't fit this criteria. So this is just food for thought. All right, so real quick, let's begin with discussing how a female inmate employs their game with a male staff member. So we're going to go first with a female inmate and a male staff member. All right, so the physical relationship may provide the female inmate with the leverage needed to fully compromise staff and ultimately make their wanted requests. When a female inmate targets a male staff member, the inmate may look to push the male staff member into acting out on their animalistic nature. The female inmate will push the physical, sexual, and observe how the male staff member reacts towards them. The inmate is looking for any signs of attraction. This can include the body language of the male staff member, where the staff member focuses their attention, or where they obviously don't, and sexual references while communicating and seeking the inmate's attention knowingly or unknowingly. In order for this game to be successful, the female inmate will give the male staff member the illusion. This is key here, guys. This is the main difference between a male and a female being targeted by the opposing gender of the inmate. So basically, this is the main difference between a male inmate targeting a female, but in this case here, a female inmate targeting a male officer. In order for the game to be successful, the female inmate will give the male staff member the illusion of control. The illusion of control is paramount. A male staff member wants to avoid at all costs being put into a position where they are in need of protection or reliance on a female inmate. The illusion of control is also an effort by the inmate to minimize the staff's perception of the risk as defined by the consequences of being caught in the illegal act. Being professional should be the main reason why staff maintains the proper boundaries. If staff only maintain the proper boundaries because they fear the consequences of their actions, their resistance will be weak when the consequences are minimized or perceived to be non-existent by the manipulative inmate. Now, at all times, the control is in the hands of the female inmate. Be advised, they're using their physicality to get a rise from the male staff member. The control is extremely subtle and actually very deceiving. The male staff member will truly believe that they have total control of the path they're being led down until the moment they're taken out in handcuffs. And guys, just real quick to finish this part before we get to the male female, it's almost done. For this part here, I want you guys to realize something. You'll see that where, let's say there's an idea that something's going on, they decide to separate the male officer, the male staff member from the female inmate. You'll see that that male staff member starts to feel that they're losing the control, and they'll try to make contact with that inmate. And I've seen it happen, whether they use another inmate or they're dumb enough to talk to another staff member saying, hey, you work in this unit today? Or, you know, again, you start to see that when they're no longer directly observing this inmate, you'll start to see the lack of control. Now, this last part, female staff members with male inmates, mind you guys, I want you guys to listen to what I said. I said the illusion of control. That's key, because a male staff member is not going to feel that they have no power over a female inmate. They're not going to be willing to give that up. But having said that, they have. But the female is able to feed back this illusion of control like you have it, but they don't have it. And again, they don't realize it until they've been separated. Now, this is a little different. As for female staff members, the game being employed by male inmates will be slightly different. In some cases, there may be a female staff member that presents a very low level of self-esteem. The male inmate may foster a connection with the female staff member by providing her with positive attention. The manipulative inmate connects themselves to any positive thought the female staff member may have or feel about themselves. The level of connection goes beyond the workplace as the female staff member begins to think of the inmate while on her own personal time. Every effort the staff member chooses to emotionally lift herself will be connected to the manipulative inmate's game being played. Now, this is the key. Eventually, the female staff member may build an emotional connection with the inmate that travels way outside her prescribed role. This game is very slow and subtle. Where am I? This game is very slow moving, but extremely dangerous. The inmate's ability to gain trust and acceptance will eventually lead the female staff member down a path she cannot physically or emotionally escape. The inmate will even offer the compromised female staff member protection. This offer of protection will be accepted by the female staff member because they've already been knowingly given up their level of control. Knowingly giving up their level of control. A little bit different than the males. As mentioned above, this is the main shift of the game played against male and female staff members. The male staff member, in an effort to maintain their perception of control, will not accept the offer of protection from a female inmate, whereas the female staff will. Female staff may be more aware of the control they're giving away, but with that said, they have justified it by the level of trust and protection they believe they're getting in return. Hey, Joe, what's your thoughts on that shift? Do you buy into what I just said, or?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's pretty spot on. I've never worked a female facility in my career, thankfully, but I've heard horror stories where it's pretty much led that way. And from what I understand, just from other administrators who have told me about staff that they had to take out of their female facilities was, a lot of the times that the females who prey on the male staff, normally it's not just one. They normally get 3 or 4 of their inmate buddies, and it winds up being a pack. And by the time it's said and done, that officer is backed into a corner, way past the point of no return.
That's true. They all wind up working together depending on what the officer's interest is or the staff member's interest is. And then they go ahead and they support the one he seems to be or she seems to be most interested in. All right, guys, so we're going to keep this moving. We're almost done, but we got a few more videos left. So we're going to move over to video 7. And I think this will be the last 2 rules of scarcity and obligation. So let's get that off. And you guys can put in the comments how this could apply to your life, because I'm sure it does. All right, so now we're going to scarcity and obligation. This is on the videos are a little shorter now, so we should go by a little quicker.
All right, how you guys doing? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to part 7 of my inmate manipulation course. We're going to cover the last 2 laws of influence, scarcity and obligation. Both of these are meant to apply pressure to get you to do something you wouldn't normally do. So let's talk about scarcity. Have you ever had an officer or staff member that had a great career, things are going good, and towards the end, they do something foolish? Towards the end, they wind up doing something that they never did in their career. And then most of us are left wondering, why? How could that happen? You know, the scarcity technique is applied when an inmate feels that we are desperate, when they're able to see that maybe there's something going on in our personal lives, and now that we're scrambling in desperation, the inmates will come up and pounce, and they'll give you that one-time offer. So to give you an example, let's say you have an officer that just had a great career, and all of a sudden his personal life is going through a divorce, and he's going through money problems. And again, how does an inmate find out about this? It happens. Sometimes the officer is telling his business on a wing, which they shouldn't be doing, and the inmates can overhear it. Or maybe the officer was a tight officer, wore his uniform like to the T, perfect, and all of a sudden he starts coming in or she starts coming in, the uniform's a little bit sloppy. There's a change. And now when that uniform's a little bit sloppy, the inmate's thinking, wow, something's weird. Something's not right. Something's going on. This officer looks a little disheveled. So what happens is these inmates get wind of something personal going on, and they automatically pounce on this officer. And they're hoping that this officer, out of desperation, says yes, because the officer is desperate. So again, in this case here, let's say the officer needs money. It's a one-time offer. The inmate comes up and says, I know you have a problem right now. I know you're going through a divorce. I know you're trying to fight to have your kids, and I know you just don't have the money. So it's one-time offer right now. Do this for me, and I'll pay you this amount. But you have to give me the answer right now. And the reason they want that answer right now is because they know if you go home and think about it, well, you're probably not going to go through with it. But they want to get you right at that desperate moment. And they will not let you leave. They want that answer in that moment. That's why it's very important to do your best to keep that home life home. And in this case here was a simple discovery. Either he shared it on the wing where inmates could hear it, or he told an officer and word got out, or maybe they told an inmate, as foolish as that may be. Or maybe he just came to work or she came to work not looking the way they used to look, you know, just disheveled in their appearance. Either way, the inmates took a look at that, was able to seize the opportunity and pounce. And again, out of desperation, they're hoping that officer says yes. So that's the scarcity technique. That's the one time. The last part is obligation. This is a little bit tricky. Obligation is sort of, I do for you, you do for me. It's kind of the law of reciprocity. So basically, I do you a favor in hopes that you have to pay me back. And believe it or not, guys, when someone does you a favor, there is an overwhelming sense to pay that favor back, and inmates know that. That's why, well, let's say you have an inmate porter and they're doing work for you, you have to make it known that it's a job. I can easily have you replaced. So if you think you're coming here and you're going to be doing me a favor, that's not going to work. Those keyword favors means that I have to pay you back. Do not let inmates employ that type of verbiage. Do not let inmates say, hey, for you, Mr. Gangi, I'll do it, but for nobody else. don't put yourself in a position where you're going to feel obligated to pay back. The inmate comes up and says, hey, Gange, I'll clean your area, but I'll only do it for you. It's like, no, you'll clean the area because I told you to do it. And if you don't want to do it, you'll get charged, of course, and I'll get somebody else. I am not going to be in a position to be obligated to you, which means that if you get written up, I'm also not going to defend you because you work for me. If you did something wrong, you did something wrong. It is what it is. I'm not going to go back and tell the officer I wrote you up, hey, don't write him up because he's a good worker. No, I'll train somebody else to be a good worker. I'm not going to be ever put myself in a position where I'm obligated to an inmate, because eventually that obligation is going to require me to pay it back, and trust and believe the inmates are going to expect that. You know, there's a story where we had an officer whose life was saved by an inmate. Now think about that. Your life is saved by an inmate. That's a tremendous obligation that you're going to feel to have to pay back. And is the inmate going to expect that? Management now has to make sure they do what they can to end that overwhelming sense of obligation, whether it's a chance for that staff member to maybe put a couple of bucks in the commissary, because they have done that in the past. Believe it or not, this is how powerful that feeling of obligation can be. This inmate saved my life. So sometimes management tries to kind of end that obligation by saying, okay, since you did this, we're going to do this for you. And this way it alleviates that sense of obligation that that staff member will have toward that inmate. But the best thing to do is literally transfer that inmate out. Do not let that inmate and that staff member have any more of a connection, because that is an extreme sense of obligation that that staff member has towards that inmate now, because that inmate saved their lives. So again, these are just 2 quick rules. We don't really have to go too deep in that because this is pretty much self-explanatory. It's kind of like for the obligation, it's the quid pro quo. I do for you, you do for me. So be careful of the words that inmates use, like favor or I'll only do it for you, because these are words to imply that I'm going to do for you, you're going to do something for me. You have to nip that in the bud and don't allow yourself to fall for this feeling of obligation, this feeling of, okay, well, you've done for me, now I have to do for you. Okay, and that matters, and even as I said, for the saving of the officer or staff member's life, that feeling of obligation, you have to be able to find a way to nip that. So again, if it was something just like we mentioned before, where it was the quid pro quo, I do for you, you do for me, again, not going to happen. I'll remove that inmate, I'll fire that inmate, I'll do whatever I can to make sure that I don't feel obligated to an inmate. But if ever there's a chance where there's that forced obligation, like an inmate saves my life, well, then I'm going to go to management now and figure out how can we resolve this. Can we get the inmate shipped out, or is there a way I can put a little something on their commissary, just something so I can alleviate that overwhelming sense of obligation. Okay, guys, so in the last 2 videos, we're going to do some more manipulative tactics just to kind of cover what we have left. And the final video is going to be called Chumps. And that's going to be our way to defend ourselves, kind of advice on how to put up that shield. All right, guys, I'll see you in video 8. Video 8.
All right, so we're moving forward. I just want to mention something to you guys. Video 9, after we do video 8, is going to have just some little things that I want to put out, just stuff that didn't fall into the way the dialogue was structured. So 8 was kind of like just some added thoughts I wanted to share. And then 9 is going to be the defense. And we break it down by using the word chumps. There's a lot there I think you're going to find of interest. But I want to mention something real quick when it talks about protection. That's great when an inmate protects you. I get it. You know, it could happen. You can get caught in a unit, be assaulted, and an inmate could be the first one to respond and save your life. But the biggest concern we have sometimes is, how do we know that wasn't a setup? How do we know that didn't occur so the inmate could actively put themselves in a position to save your life? And now staff has that obligation. And trust, guys, that has happened. Inmates will definitely throw out the word favor in a way to say, hey, I did you that favor. You know, what are you able to do for me? And guys, that feeling of obligation is very powerful, because it's a conflict and it starts to make you hesitant in doing the right thing. You know, because again, the inmate saves your life. Now I got to write the inmate up. Ooh, imagine that, guys. Imagine an inmate just saved your life, but the next day they do something foolish and your job is to what? Charge them. what do? Do you choose the job or do you choose the inmate? Because that inmate saved your life. Back in the day, someone saved your life. Their life was indebted to you. That's how it was back in the day. So now think about that. This inmate just saved my life. So do I choose the job or do I choose the inmate who saved my life? And that's why, again, the right thing to do is obviously do what's correct by the job, but we as management also have to step up. When something like that happens, we have to find a way to alleviate that level of obligation. So when the inmate tries to test that officer on that favor that was given, the officer or the staff member can turn back and say, no, we're good. We're squared. We're 100% squared. So as tough as this may be, I have to write you. But again, I think the best bet, especially if it's in a prison, jails are tough because it may not be so easy to transfer them out, but on a prison, get the inmate out because that interaction with that staff and that inmate it's going to be very unique. What's your thoughts on all that, Joe?
Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in, especially when you're that far indebted. When it comes to saving one's life, that's an iffy situation. But ultimately, the administration needs to find a way of separating, like you said, separating that inmate from that staff member. There's always things you can do to try to separate them from that area. Transfer the offender to another area, somewhere out of sight, out of mind, just to alleviate the possibility of that happening. Does it happen? Yes, it happens. And it's just a bad position for everybody to be in. But the biggest thing is, you definitely don't want to go in there with the mindset of putting yourself in that position voluntarily.
Yeah, I agree, guys. That's why it's our job to make sure we kind of do what we can to defend certain impulses that could be compulsionary by nature. Like I'll give you a quick story before we go into the next video. We're down to the last two. Great job, guys. Hopefully let's get some plays on the replay. But very good information here, and what a great crowd with us. I mean, some of them are not even in corrections; they're just so invested, and hopefully they can find some value in their regular life as well. I want to mention something, guys. I just want to share it right now. When I worked at one of my facilities, I questioned a certain policy they had that didn't make sense to me at first, but later I totally understood it. So we had an inmate, we had a unit where an inmate tried to commit suicide. And when the inmate was making the attempt to commit suicide, the officer was doing the tour and they're seeing it happen. And, of course, they're going to want to make an effort to save that inmate's life. That's what we do, guys. Outside of what people may think, I have 20 years in experience. I've never seen an inmate hanging themselves and an officer not give a fuck about it and not make the attempt to save that inmate's life. Again, with security measures in place, because it's not always that easy just to get in there. So the key here is, as this inmate's going through the routine, trying to hang themselves, the policy is, this is overnight shift now, everything's locked down, you don't go in without backup. That's the policy. And, obviously it makes sense because it could be a setup. You go in, the inmate's faking it all, and now they get an officer hostage. Well, sometimes the response would take a bit because the keys were not located in the unit held by the officer. It was located in the center area, which is only a few feet away technically because it was a smaller facility. But the first impression was like, why don't you keep the keys on the officer? Because it'd be a quicker response. And the reason why the keys are not kept on the officer is because it eliminates their impulse to want to just open up the cell door and go in. Because that's how much we're motivated to go save a life. That's why I think that story is worth sharing. Usually I don't share stories about the job, but I want you to know that. We have the keys. We see an inmate doing that. It's hard for us just to stand by and watch that happen. So some of us have been known to open up the door, risk getting the charge to go save that inmate's life. So in order to eliminate that impulse, we take the keys. So they don't just jump in and save the person, go to save the inmate's life, because again, it could be a setup. You can open up the cell door and the inmate's not even making an attempt to kill themselves. They come right at you. So in order to eliminate the impulse, because we know that our officers are first responders, they're going to want to jump in and save, the keys are somewhere else. So when the keys come on scene, you already have the second officer there. So again, it's a unique situation because when you have an inmate that goes to kill themselves and the officer, let's say by themselves, responds and they do have the key and they open up and then the officer gets attacked or something negative happens and we go to write that officer up, the first thing management should ask is, hey, wait a second, there was some good intent here. He wanted to save the inmate's life. Yes, he broke policy. He should have waited for another officer, but the intent was good. So having said that, could we have done something better? Yes, we need to eliminate that impulse. How do you do that? Put the key somewhere else. Because if you're watching it happen, how hard is it for you to watch it happen, knowing that you have the solutions right here to stop it? So again, I thought that was an interesting story to share when it comes to impulse and compulsion. Okay, so video 8 is going to be kind of like a wrap-up video. It's just going to kind of throw out a couple of things just to have in the back of your mind. I think it's a great video, one of my favorites in this series. And then, of course, 9 is going to be our defense, which I know you guys are going to love. So let's get to video 8. Joe, you're doing it, brother. Okay, hold on.
I told you I got plenty of coffee, babe. I'm here for the haul.
No, man, I really love you, man. I mean, this is great just to be working with you. So these last 2 videos, the first one's 11 minutes, the other one's 11 minutes. So this is going to be just some more manipulative tactics.
Okay, guys, welcome to video 8. We're going to cover some more manipulative tactics that inmates can employ, kind of dealing with their motivation of why they do what they do. Also going to reiterate on some of the topics that we discussed before, basically some of the personality traits, that insight we need to have both on our personality and the situation. And we're going to start off with that because I want to finish off on what personality traits can increase the target on your back. And we came up with 3 personality traits. You have the soft personality trait, the medium personality trait, and the hard personality trait. Obviously, the medium personality trait is where you want to be. It's a balance of both the soft and hard. But let me just go over some of these personality traits. And guys, right off the bat, you're going to know, since we've gone through all these videos, why these personality traits will not work in corrections. Starting with the soft. Very trusting, overly familiar, naive, wants to help, sympathetic, the inability to say no, you're gullible, you're careless, you're too lenient. We know right off the bat after watching these videos why that will not work in this profession. So again, get insight, look at yourself and ask yourself, do any of the traits that I just mentioned fit within your personality? But let's talk about the hard side. Some people think, well, Gangi, I just say no to everything. So here we go, strictly by the book. Everything is black and white, no in between, no leeway, macho syndrome, obsessive, demanding. I'm going to give you guys a little something here. When you're constantly by the book and you think of everything as just black and white with no in between, you become very predictable. Very, very predictable. Inmates will look at you and like, well, this person can't adapt and adjust. In this profession, that's what you have to do. You have to be able to adapt and adjust. So think about that. A lot of inmates will think that you're always going to that rule book because that's your backbone. That's your backbone. And they will play games with you if they can predict what you're going to do next. And they're able to do that by what? By knowing if I do this, you're definitely going to do this. So again, soft and hard personality is not where you want to be. You want to be within that medium personality. And this fits perfectly well with what we just discussed. Now, medium staff members, they know how to use the traits of both the soft and hard categories at the appropriate time and the right manner. The process needed to manipulate this type of officer or staff member takes more time. So check out these traits, guys. Cautious, firm, thorough, organized, fair, consistent, adaptable, analytical and self-confident, professional, quick to act, and loyal. Loyal to yourself, loyal to your family, loyal to your peers, loyal to the agency. That loyalty gives you an unshakable foundation. Now, guys, you already know that some of the situations that expose us to risks is because we're exposed to offenders. We're in a help and role. Some officers that work independently are isolated. They become at risk, having authority or influence over others. Remember, inmates are looking for a sense of control. So right off the bat, you have authority over them. That puts you as a target right off the bat because if I need to get control, I need to be able to control you. Complacency. Complacency will definitely put you at risk. Russ is doing a whole class on complacency. You guys should take that course. It's a great course. But if you're complacent, guys, sometimes you don't know it's a very slowly deadly enemy. So be wary of yourself. Check those policies and procedures and always check to make sure you're still doing things the way it's supposed to be done. Don't become lazy. Treat everything as a new situation. Also, we have a lack of experience of being conned. It's not something that we are exposed to every day, but when you work in that prison system, you will be exposed. So don't try to go tit for tat with an inmate who's a pro at this. The moment you sense that you're being played or you feel that you're being played, nip it in the bud. Don't try to play the game with them. You will lose. These are professionals. I want to go over a few more things before we finish off this video, but I want to just give you a final understanding of what manipulation is. So you guys understand that manipulation is about a gain or loss, right? So if you're a manipulator, you only see a relationship as a gain or a loss. What can I gain from this, or what can I lose? And if you're at a loss, if the manipulator's at a loss, they feel that they're losing control. So manipulators must always feel that they're in control, which means that they have to gain something from the relationship that they're trying to get control of. Now, how do you recognize that you're being played? One thing is you have to know within yourself, again, it's all about being insightful, the bond that you have between that inmate. Recognize it. Is the bond an excessive, unfamiliar, undue bond? Also, that dependency between either you on the inmate or the inmate on you. Recognize that you should never, and we talked about this in obligation, reciprocity, never be dependent on an inmate. Never be obligated to an inmate. That is a definite sign that you're involved with them too much. Also, my old lieutenant told me way back when, I mentioned this in the older video, if you think about an inmate in any capacity when you're at home, that means you're too involved. Now, why would an inmate choose to manipulate somebody? So right off the bat, they're looking for a goal to be accomplished. There's something that they want to accomplish. They look at the personality and characteristics of the victims that they choose. That's why there's a game for everyone, guys, because the game adapts, it adjusts. They also look for the possible time it takes to get involved. So as I said, that medium officer, it takes too much time to manipulate that medium officer. So I'm going to move on and go after that soft or hard officer. And they also look for the location and physical layout of the area where the deception and or manipulation will take place. Guys, I'll give you, we talked about isolation. Sometimes there are officers that work at satellite posts that have no connection to peer staff. And what you need to do at that point is you need to reinforce a connection, which means that if these officers are isolated, then they should be visited more by support staff, by supervisors, just so the inmates can see that we're still connected. Now, why do inmates manipulate? They manipulate because one thing is they look for status among peers. Think about that. If I control a staff member, I get boosted in status. I get props. They want also control. If I control him, I control my destiny. So they want that level of autonomy. They also look for that personal reward or gain. I'm going to get something from this person, so I'm going to play them out until they're able to give me what I need, or just something as simple. I'm looking to control staff because I want to embarrass them. I want to humiliate them. Hey, guys, look what I got this staff member doing. I got him looking all over the place for something that doesn't even exist. It's a game for them. And remember, manipulation only occurs if you allow it to happen. It's a two-way street. We talked about some of these manipulation tactics before, so just to, I guess, reiterate them. Flattery, zero tolerance for any type of flattery, sympathy, helplessness, especially if you're in a service provider role. Sometimes inmates will play that helplessness card because they know that you want to help, because that's why you're in the profession. Don't let them play you. Your help is defined by your prescribed role. Don't get taken out of that prescribed role. That confidentiality route we talked about, when an inmate tries to tell you something in secret and they know it's supposed to get an action or a reaction and nothing happens, that's because they know, okay, well, this person hasn't told anybody. That's why if an inmate comes up to you and says, hey, can I tell you something in secret? No, I'm going to report it. And that's great because they'll see that at that point that you're connected with support staff, you're connected with your supervisors. That confidentiality route is just a test to see where you go with that information. If you keep it inside, which shows that you're not connected to your peers, or if you tell your peers, which shows, yes, we're connected. Isolation, we touched multiple times on. Touching and sexual references, obviously zero tolerance for that. And coercion and intimidation. Guys, do not let inmates use fear tactics to get you to do something foolish. That's a way for them to get control over you. You need to get that control back. Inmate threatens you, you write them up, you do what you got to do, you report it, but you do not let that inmate take control of you by that threat. If they get leverage on you, do the right thing and turn yourself in. Do not lose that level of control. That's what they want to do. They want to do that so you have no control and they get what they want. You have the ability to take that control back. It may not be in the best outcome that you want, especially when they've created leverage. But the thing is, once you know at that point that you're being played, do the right thing. Get control back and don't have anybody else fall victim for the foolish choices that you made. I want to talk about one last thing before we go to the last video, which is suicide manipulation. A lot of people will be wondering from the outside, like, why would an inmate play a game? Why would they pretend that they want to kill themselves? What can they possibly gain from that? Remember, guys, when dealing with inmates, you always have to question their motivations. Why are they asking you this, or why are they telling you this? Always question every inmate's motivation, every interaction you have with an inmate. So what I'm going to do here is, for suicide manipulation, now, by the way, you have to treat every attempt of suicide or every I'm going to go do this suicide threat to kill themselves, you have to treat it as a real attempt, which means you have to run the gamut. But with that said, these are some of the reasons why inmates may fake a suicide attempt, just to get it out there. One is to elicit sympathy from staff. One is to avoid a court appearance, to obtain a housing relocation, to bolster an insanity defense, to get a trip or transfer to a hospital, to go on a transport to a mental health facility, possible escape plan, to obtain preferential staff treatment, or to seek sympathy and compassion from a previously unsympathetic spouse or family member. That's not an all-inclusive list, but that's some of the reasons. So again, look at the motivations. All because an inmate says that they're going to kill themselves, maybe it could be real or maybe it can't be, but at least I've given you some other motivations as to why they would say they would try to kill themselves. Now, guys, one last video is video 9. We're going to talk about chumps. Now we're going to present you a defense against the games that inmates play. We've gone over some. I'll cover some new ones. And episode 9, the next video, should be the last video, which will complete my series on inmate manipulation. Okay, guys, stand by for video 9. Video 9.
All right, hold on. We're making it, Joe. We're making it.
Gangi and them fingers, man.
I know. Hey, I want to touch on 2 things real quick. I don't know if we mentioned it in the other videos. I know, but guys, if you want to get this book, it's available on Amazon. It's a little bit more detailed than the presentation. But I don't know if we mentioned 2 things I wanted to talk about real quick. We kind of touched on it before with the labels matter. If I don't see an inmate as an inmate, it could change how I see myself. In some facilities, they actually call porters trustees. I'm not a big fan of that, because if I'm calling you a trustee, that means I can trust you. And sorry, universal precaution. And then the other thing is, when inmates do divide and conquer, I don't know if it was mentioned in this. I know it's definitely in the book, but be careful of certain words that they use to separate. I don't know if I mentioned, I'm pretty sure I could have, but for some reason, I don't remember mentioning it, but I know that's part of the dialogue I give. But when you're dealing with inmates and they start to try to bring you to their group, they start to use certain words like we or us to bring you in, and your support staff become them or they. They use partnership words. So those partnership words are meant to bring you closer to them, and then they use words that are meant to divide. So again, if I'm an inmate and I'm trying to pull Joe in, I'm going to make sure, Joe, those other officers, they're not like us. They're not like us. They don't do things the way we do. Now what happens is Joe gets more connected to me. So on the other end, look what just happened here. The support staff are no longer part of the we, no longer part of the us. They become the they and the them. So remember, be very wary of those partnership words. Hey, Joe, real quick. What's your thoughts on, again, we're always running the gamut with a suicide call. Don't get me wrong, but suicides being used to manipulate housing. Does that happen a lot?
Man, that happens more than you know. And that's one thing that nobody should play with, regardless whether they're joking or not. Man, if they even mention that word, My officers knew right then and there. They put it on the radio. This is Officer so-and-so. I'm activating ICS. I have an offender in distress. He's stating he's suicidal and going to commit suicide. And we bring the team. Babe would come full force. Next thing he knows, he's in another cell by himself with just a pair of underwear. And the oh shit factor kicks in. And they kind of know from that point on that, they use that tactic quite a bit, in order to try to get to another cell with their homeboy or maybe their lover. No telling. But yeah, that's when they mention the suicide word, babe, that is one word you don't play with because, regardless of whether they're joking or you don't know, the end result could be disastrous for everybody.
Yes, and guys, it is around 2 a.m. by me. I'm on the East Coast. I live in Jersey, and we still got our crew in down to 17, but we're doing it. A lot to learn here. I know people are already going to be replaying the video. So again, in that last video, I just kind of rounded it up. I'm just getting some last thoughts out there. Now, this is our defense. My boy Gary Cornelius in the book Art of the Con, I believe, wrote a thing called Chumps, and he broke it down like CHUMPS, all stand for something in regards to how we can defend ourselves. And everybody's wired with coffee. I know Joe said he's got to go do some laps when it's done. Hey, Sally. I know some people may have to do the rewatch. I like that Facebook jail. I'm using this one, corrections. So I'm going to get into this last video. It's called Chumps. And again, if you guys decide to watch it again, I think it would be good if you watch it again and see how it could apply. Because as I said, we may have set the prison setting up, but I had to take the theories from outside and bring them in. So they're not originally prison-based theories. They're built on my experiences. So I'm sure if you evaluate your own experiences, you'll be able to find out how these apply. Now, mind you guys, this video, this book, is not from one day of working in corrections. It's the pinnacle of my career. It's, at the time, 18 years of me just evaluating every experience. I mean, literally, that's just who I am. I've always done that. Every interaction I had, how could I have done it better? So this is the pinnacle. This is what I knew I would give back to the profession eventually because I'd written a lot of this stuff down. What was I going to do with it? And then again, the other book is the same thing I got coming out that's in the publisher's market. Again, there's always stuff you can add. I mean, that's the sad thing about writing a book. You're growing, but the book stays the same. So, I'm going to try to add a few more chapters when I release it. Again, probably when I retire, I'll do like an anniversary release and I'm going to add small talk and a couple of things. But in the meantime, if we don't have to wait for the book, I have videos that will complement what I want to add. I have videos on small talk, in which I think me and Russ did a great job on that. But again, guys, this is literally 18 years of experience being wrapped into a class that I hope can provide people just better insight. And it's funny because just the other day, the reason why I did a video on haters today is because there's these two people on Facebook that swear I've never worked in corrections. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and validate myself to them. I mean, if they would have messaged me privately and may have asked me, I'll shoot the shit with you all day. But when you go to question someone's integrity on a public platform, don't expect me to answer back because you're not doing it for me. You're doing it because you want to showboat. So having said that, have the people say, Gangi, just wondering, what have you done? I'll talk to you private. But if you're putting it on a platform, I'm a poser. I mean, guys, let me just show you something real quick. That's a picture of me when I was a sergeant in 2011. And I know it's crazy, but I still have that smile going into work. And I think that's pretty cool. But that's me when I was a sergeant in 2011. So, and then obviously training stuff along the way. But I didn't like the poser thing. And one last thing, it's in my other video. Yeah, Connie will be involved Monday. We have a live with Connie on Monday. One more thing. I don't look for the outside world for validation, but I do look for something from the people that are my peers. So the peers do affect me a little bit. I can't lie. That's truthful. So if you work in the profession, I'm trying to reach you and I can't. That does get to me. So it's different. Like, it's not from people who may not know and never know. It's from people that should know. And again, but either way, All right, so here we go. Yes, Monday we're going to talk about Connie's book and her life. Talk about what brought her into corrections and what she's doing now, and she's very excited. And then hopefully one day she'll interview me on her show. That would be nice. I think so. I'd like to see that happen. All right, guys. So here we go. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Someone liked the pick. Hope I still look the same. That's like 11, 12 years ago. It's hard to believe that. Time flies, man. Jesus. All right. It's the last one. It's 11 minutes, and it's called Chumps.
Okay, guys, this is part 9 of my inmate manipulation course. This is the final video. This is ways to fight back against inmate manipulation. You guys went through 8 videos, covered a gamut of games that inmates can play. So this is how we're going to prepare you to defend yourself. So again, it's ways to fight back. I'm going to go over some of my notes real quick. I'm going to throw it out your way. A lot to cover here. But again, we've talked about this before. Some of it's going to be just us reiterating it, and the rest may be new information, but this is great because this will keep you on your toes. So ways to fight back. First off, be an active part of your correctional team. Let the inmates see that. Be suspicious. Question and verify every inmate action and request. Get to know what their motivations are. Follow the institutional rules, policies, and procedures. We talked about that because that will keep you within your prescribed role. Monitor and document inmates' remarks, gestures, and actions. I agree that 100%. Inmate gives you a comment that's inappropriate, document it. Because you did the right thing, but that documentation goes on the inmate's record, and that will help others who may not be as strong as you. Let them know the type of inmate they're dealing with. Communicate openly and often with supervisors and other employees. I agree with that. Let the inmates see that you guys are connected. Know your job and get further education. Learn to say no, and when you say no, it's no now, no later, and no forever. Never give or take anything to an inmate, no matter how trivial. Do not relay personal information, problems, or feelings to inmates. Always be cautious and tactically ready when dealing with inmates. Address inmates appropriately. They are and should not be your friends. Take action early if you feel that you have been targeted for manipulation. We talked about that. It's a feeling. If you feel it, do something about it. Don't wait for the end result. Never give one particular inmate power or special privilege over another. I want to talk about chumps. This is the last part of what we're going to be discussing. It deals with self-defense. This comes from The Art of the Con, Gary Cornelius's book. And chumps is spelled C-H-U-M-P-S. And we're going to break down each letter. But real quick, the C is for controlling yourself and not being complacent. The H is helping offenders to help themselves. The U is understanding the offender's subculture and understanding yourself. M is maintaining a safe distance. P is practicing professionalism and adhering to policies and procedures. And S is stopping yourself from being stressed out so you're not so vulnerable. So let's talk about control. I'm just going to go through these guys real quick because you already know what these are. We've broken these down in the prior videos. So this is just a reminder. This is a good video if you ever want to watch by itself again, because again, as long as you're familiar with the information from the first 8 videos, this here will just fit right in. So say no firmly. We talked about that. Broken record technique. No, no, no. Challenge excuses. Know who's in your area and who should be. Be curious. Do not get overwhelmed. Be thorough and consistent with your procedures. You are a supervisor. Stick by your decisions. Get the inmate to stick to the point. Guys, do not let inmates ramble. They have something, tell me what it is. Just tell me what it is. Just get right to the point. Control the dialogue. Maintain good eye solid contact. Follow chain of command. We talked about that. Reinforce chain of command. Do not let inmates go around that chain of command. Give the power back to that initial chain of command. Let the inmates respect that. If you're a supervisor and inmates constantly come up to you, they're coming up to you to circumvent that level of authority that comes from the officer. Bring them back to that officer. Be decisive. And remember, you're constantly being observed. That's the control part. For the H, for the helping part, it's regulations, and that protects us, and encourage the inmates to use the programs that are available. There's so much available for the inmates. You don't need to go out of your way. Just this is where you need to be. Go. Do what you got to do. but you don't need my help to mail out a letter for you or whatever it is. There's programs here, figure it out. The understanding part. Be well read in current literature and studies about offenders. Learn from veteran staff. Don't blame yourself for inmate plight. Attend training. Know what's going on in your facility. Observe the inmates because they're observing you, and self-inventory yourself for weakness. And we talked about that. Have that insight, guys. Have that insight on yourself and the situations that you're in. The maintaining. Do not use first names. You're not connected to these inmates like that. You can use Mr., inmate, whatever it is, but do not use first names. Do not accept phone calls from inmates. Do not visit or socialize with inmates' families and or friends. Do not buy gifts for inmates. Do not be swayed or influenced. And you're the only one. Don't fall for that. You don't want to be the only one. You don't want to be separated from your support staff, from your peers, from your supervisors. No discussing your personal business, 100%. Shut down inferences to sex or flirtation. Make sure they know that you're shutting it down. Why? Because it's unprofessional. Because I don't want that. Write them up. And remember what your job and role is as a correctional officer or correctional staff member. These are some keys for being professional. That's the P part of CHUMPS. Know and follow your code of conduct. Be neat and well groomed. Be neat and well organized. Remember, guys, if you're not neat and well organized, you stand out from the rest. That's going to present you as a target. So straighten yourself up. Look like everyone else. Be tight. Make that uniform look tight. Don't give the inmates a reason to pull you out from your crowd. Do not spread rumors, come across as self-assured, act like a professional at all times. Do not complain about anything relating to the job or how unfair the inmate situation is. Be clear when communicating. Keep the lines of communication with other staff members open. Avoid the we, they, or us versus them type games. We talked about that in the very first video. How the inmates were trying to pull me into their group by putting me as a we and the staff as a us or a them. There are no secrets between you and an inmate. Make use of the written word. Report all infractions, especially at the beginning of your career. Now, don't get me wrong, as you develop, you can always have some discretion, but the end result here is you have to set a high level so the inmates can't maneuver you. You understand that, right? Set a very high level, very zero tolerant at the very beginning. And then eventually, as you gain discretion, you can kind of work a little bit more. But the very beginning, when you're still getting your footing, write up everything. Do not put yourself in a place so you feel obligated to an inmate. We discussed that. Do your job to the best of your abilities. If you have questions, ask, and use professional lines of communication to find out things about an inmate. The last thing, guys, S. It's about stress, because stress is a killer, but also leaves us open to manipulation. So again, be self-critical. Do not burn out. Be aware of how being stressed out can make you vulnerable. Rely on your family, friends, counselors, supervisors for support. Be aware of stress support programs. Ask for time off if stress is getting to you. Do not be afraid to ask for a new job transfer if need be. Remember, it's about your health. And just ultimately take charge of your life. That's the key, guys. That's the key. Also, accept the limitations of your job. Take command. Mean what you say. When you make a mistake, admit it. Leave your personal issues outside and believe strongly in the service and duty that you provide. You know, there's a question here, a group of questions here that I got from Guarding Against Manipulation by Criminal Offenders. And I'm just going to read over these real quick. They're like questions or statements. But I think this is something that we should have playing in our head at the end of this. One is, I believe I can be manipulated. I've been conned in the past. I'm strictly a professional at work. I'm aware of my vulnerabilities. I have a professional support and I utilize it. I have a positive attitude to my work. I'm proud of my profession. I face conflict and deal with it constructively. I avoid familiarity with all offenders. I avoid gossip. I'm aware of manipulators' tactics. I communicate assertively. I never show favoritism. I'm always fair and impartial. I respect other disciplines. I am loyal. I take care of my mental health. I am consistent, a person of my word. I strictly follow procedures. I reflect on my feelings and behaviors. I keep my personal opinions to myself. I keep everything transparent and in the open. I keep an open mind about people. I am cautious and vigilant. I document things. I nip game playing in the bud. I'm a person of strong integrity. I am self-disciplined. I value all my colleagues. I foster teamwork and cooperation. I take care of my personal relationships. I communicate with my management. I seek advice regularly. I get professional supervision. Guys, this is it, guys. That's my manipulation course. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We covered a lot. I would love your feedback, guys. If you get a chance, please recommend it to others. This course saved my life. This is my experience. This is me, 18 years, telling you of my life in corrections. This is my work. This was me knowing that it could happen to me, and this was me having the insight to know that. This was me being wary of every situation I was placed in. What situations I made myself be placed in, what situations just happened, and what situations the inmates had control of. So guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get a lot from it. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, you can always email me at gangianthony@yahoo.com. And I am available to teach this at your facility. So if you ever want that, again, you can email me at gangianthony@yahoo.com, or you should technically contact Academy Hour, Amy Morgan.
That was it was a while ago with the Academy place. So hey Joe, what's your thoughts on those defensive tactics?
Interesting. It starts early on. If you don't catch it early on and start it at an early stage, man, it's hell to try to curve it at the end stage, because by the time you get to the end stage, it's too late. It's already a done deal. It's a wrap. You've been sucked in. A lot of things go into it. Integrity, self-confidence, self-esteem. And then on the outer circle of that, you got your coworkers that should be looking out for you. Your supervisor should be looking out for you. And worst comes to worst, you got the word no. Write it on your hand. If you can't say it, show it.
That's spot on. And guys, listen, this was a hell of a journey, but definitely a fun journey. Julie says, please email Anthony for our certificates. I said, yes, certificates will be made by Joe. I'll forward him the emails. Just what the hell. But guys, again, we'll have Connie on Monday, but it's good to get the information out there. You never know, even if it reaches one person. It's one person that's going in this profession a lot smarter, or maybe dealing with people a little bit differently in life. And again, it's universal precaution, but that doesn't mean you stop moving. Remember, sometimes when you get this information, there's a balance between knowing it and being paranoid. We're not teaching people so they can be paranoid. We're just teaching people so they can know. Again, even in our profession here, we teach people that, yes, you can be manipulated by an inmate. But we don't teach people not to talk to inmates, so somewhere in the middle, the person having those interactions with the inmates, they have to kind of see where that fine line is. That's really up to them. A lot of them may take the universal precaution and say, yo, I can't talk to any inmate. No one's saying that ever. The balance is on you. It's between the manipulation and the universal precaution, which does not mean stop. It means to move just a little bit more cautiously. Everybody's saying thank you. Yeah, guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you'll get some rounds as we replay it. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I guess Russ must want to go get him another bowl of ice cream or something.
I don't know. Maybe Russ ate ice cream and he's lactose.
That could be. He's in a lactose coma. The biggest, the main point of the whole focus is, know your limits, know your boundaries, know their boundaries, know the job, know your policies, and know, subconsciously when you think you're being played. Trust the gut. If it feels wrong, 9 times out of 10, it is wrong. If you feel like that you might have crossed the boundary and you're not too late of being saved, I was always that type of supervisor. I was always approachable. Hey, Lou, I think I might have screwed up. Can I talk to you? Never be afraid to reach out. Don't let it go to the end stage where, it's too late. You've already brought in contraband. You got yourself arrested, charged with a felony. Our job is to help you as much as anything. We want to save you before we have to hurt you. And any supervisor in his weight and salt will know that. And, you know, he'll find 100 ways to save you before he finds that one way to hurt you. You know, catching it in the early stages is the big thing. And it doesn't have to be a supervisor. It could be a coworker. You know, another CO could, hey, Lou, you know, I'm seeing some things. You may want to talk to so-and-so. You know, there's a lot of actions that could be taken before it gets to the end stage where you get yourself in trouble. You know, the main thing is look out for each other. We're all that we have. You know, our biggest investments are employees, and we want to invest in them as much as we can. And, you know, it is what it is. You know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It's just the game.
Yeah, and guys, so Tara's having a tough day. 100 and something 10 degrees in Arizona. So
And it was 106 in Texas. I feel her pain.
Yeah, and I'm in Jersey, so I don't know if we really get that high moments, you know, but we do have winter. All right. So anyway, so she said, Russ going ice cream, confused by that. And then she said certificate. She goes, I want certificates and ice cream on the replay. So Joe will be handling both. You know, so if you get in touch with Joe, just tell him what type of flavor ice cream you want. And, you know, make sure he gets your name right when he makes those certificates.
And it comes with a complimentary photo autographed by me.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Right there.
Signed, sealed, and smacked. You know, hey guys, this was fun. I mean, it's a little late, but it was definitely worth it. We did a video prior to that where I got to see the engagement, and I said, hey, people are interested. Screw it. Let's do it. You know, I don't know if you guys know, recently I was driving home from work, and I'll show you a picture. Someone crashed into my my vehicle. So I was in between the car that crashed me and the car that was in front. So I hit the back end of their car, which ain't the end of the world on my vehicle for that part. So that's that part. Nothing major, but it's the back. This guy must have been going really, really fast.
Ouch.
So the car is pretty much totaled. So, and I take about 2 hours to get to to and from work. So, I mean, I'm okay. He was in bad shape a little bit, but I was okay. He took onus right away, took responsibility. But I have like this, my arm is all a little going up and down the arm because the seatbelts, man, they can't say I didn't wear it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Seatbelt it held me. You know what I mean? It held me. But guys, again, videos like this, when I go to teach them out, what I do is I'm never going to be able to create another video like this. Even when I teach, I'm not. So what I do is I show the video and then I talk during the breaks between each video, which helps us lengthen. You know, it's like a 4-hour course technically because, you know, again, trying to create this video again with all that much detail. I mean, I know it, but to have to recall it, you know, plus I allow for interaction with the class. But guys, we did great today. Look, now everybody's asking for certificates, Joe.
I see that.
I'm going to tell you something, guys. If I give you a certificate, the moment I put my name on it, the certificate is worth less.
What do we put on the certificate? I survived the 3-hour and 45-minute conference with Anthony Gangi, and all I got was a damn certificate.
Yeah, why not? That works. I'm sure we can make that into a shirt.
I'll make one up tomorrow.
And guys, by the way, for the inmates, they're the ones we learned this from. You know, the stuff that I teach is evergreen. I mean, it's dealing with human behavior, so I'm not teaching just a symptom. I'm teaching more of the foundation of it all, and that's the one thing about corrections. Corrections, you're constantly dealing with human behavior, so you are constantly growing because the moment you stop, they continue. That's why I've crossed into books about human behavior. I mean, me and Alicia just got done reading a book called The Power of One More by Ed Milet. You know, body language. I mean, the books that are out there that can motivate and self-help, they're reading them. And some of them, you know, the scary thing is, guys, is some books that motivate also tend to place you in higher positions and then hold everybody else as inferior. So those are good books for us to read in corrections because we have to kind of challenge that. We don't want to be inferior. You know, we have a position to uphold. So it's good to just kind of know what they're reading to stay ahead of the game because, I mean, like the cover here, you know, we can't be playing checkers while they're playing chess. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. But as always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. We're going to wrap it up. I hope everybody enjoyed oh yeah, Mark McClish. I have his book. Hold on. Where are you? Wait. Alicia's calling me out for a second. Right here. I know you're lying statement. I actually took his course. He actually gives a certificate that matters. Just let you guys know. He actually has a certificate that matters. You could use it. All right, guys. As always, I love you guys. Don't forget we have a show Monday with Connie. And then I'm going to get William Young on. We're going to do a live with him, and we'll discuss mental health. Now, mind you guys, again, even if it's mental health and corrections, we're going to open it up to a more general discussion because he knows mental health because he went through something, and he almost made a bad choice over something very temporary. So all you East Coasters, get some sleep. Yeah, we'll try. All right, guys. Love you guys. Hey, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you, man.
Y'all have a good night.